When the demolition notice was posted on the Majestic Theater's doors, I had exactly 43 days to save the building where my grandmother once performed for presidents. The developer who bought it had already ordered the wrecking balls. What he hadn't counted on was that I had inherited more than just my grandmother's stubbornness. I had her secret journals too. My name is Eliza Montgomery, and until that cold Tuesday morning in October, I had been a quietly frustrated architectural preservationist at a firm that specialized in converting historic buildings into luxury condominiums. The irony wasn't lost on me. I stood in the rain, staring at the demolition notice through the foggy lenses of my glasses. The Majestic had seen better days. Its once grand marquee now missing letters, its Art Deco facade dulled by decades of city grime. But beneath the neglect lay architectural and cultural significance that couldn't be measured in square footage or potential rental income. "It's really happening then," said a voice behind me. I turned to find Morris Abernethy, the theater's caretaker for the past 30 years, his weathered face a map of resignation. 43 days, I said, tapping the notice. "That's how long we have before Davidson Development can legally start demolition." Morris shook his head. "Won't matter. City Council already approved the permit. Historical Preservation Board voted against landmark status last month. Nobody cares about old theaters anymore, Miss Montgomery." "I care," I said, my voice sharper than intended. "And it's not just about the architecture. This place matters, Morris. To you and me, sure. To your grandmother's memory. But to Richard Davidson, it's just prime real estate for his next luxury tower." Richard Davidson. Even the name made my stomach tighten. Third-generation developer, known for acquiring historic properties at bargain prices and replacing them with steel and glass monuments to wealth. His company's slogan, "Building tomorrow by reimagining today," was plastered across construction sites throughout the city. "Can I go inside?" I asked Morris. One more time. He hesitated, then pulled a ring of keys from his pocket. "I'm still employed for another month. Guess they figured someone needs to make sure the copper pipes don't get stolen before demolition." He selected a large brass key. "Take all the time you need." The Majestic's lobby still retained echoes of its 1920s grandeur, soaring ceilings with intricate plasterwork, marble columns, and a sweeping staircase that had once been traversed by the most celebrated performers of the 20th century. My grandmother, Sophia Montgomery, had been among them. From the 1940s through the 1960s, Sophia Montgomery had been one of America's most beloved stage actresses. She performed Shakespeare for President Kennedy, starred in Broadway hits, and turned down Hollywood repeatedly, claiming that true acting could only happen in the electric space between performer and audience. The Majestic had been her favorite venue. "It's got perfect acoustics and better ghosts," she used to tell me during my childhood visits to her Manhattan apartment. "A theater needs good ghosts, Eliza. They're the ones who really know if you're acting truthfully." I made my way through the lobby to the auditorium doors. They opened with a familiar creak, revealing the vast space beyond minus 1,200 seats arranged in orchestra and 2 balcony levels, all facing the proscenium stage where my grandmother had delivered Juliet's balcony monologue, Lady Macbeth's madness, and countless other iconic performances. Despite the dust and disrepair, the theater still possessed a magnetic presence. I walked down the center aisle, my footsteps echoing in the emptiness. The stage was bare except for a single ghost light, the theatrical tradition of leaving one light burning when a theater is dark. "For safety," they said. "For the ghosts," superstition whispered. I climbed the side stairs to the stage, standing center where my grandmother had stood countless times. Above me loomed the fly system with its complex reading, below me the trapdoors leading to a warren of understage passages. Behind me stretched the backstage area, dressing rooms, and production offices. One of those offices had belonged to Anton Lenkov, the Majestic's legendary artistic director from 1938 to 1972, and though few people knew it, my grandmother's lover for much of that time. My grandfather, the respected banker everyone assumed was Sophia's one true love, had been more of a business arrangement, a public face for a woman who couldn't afford scandal in her era. The truth lived in Sophia's journals, which she had left to me upon her death 15 years ago, extracting a promise that I wouldn't read them until I turned 30. I had honored that promise, only opening the locked box of leather-bound volumes on my 30th birthday 3 years ago. Inside, I discovered not just the secret history of my grandmother's life, but potentially, I now realize, the key to saving the Majestic. Miss Montgomery? Morris called from the back of the auditorium. I hate to rush you, but I've got a meeting with the Davidson people in an hour. Thanks, Morris. Just a few more minutes. I walked to the back of the stage, through the curtains to the backstage area. Though I had visited the theater many times as a child when my grandmother had returned for special performances or fundraisers, there was one place I had never been, Anton Linkov's private office. According to Sophia's journals, it had remained largely untouched after his death, preserved first out of respect, then forgotten in the theater's gradual decline. Following the detailed descriptions from the journals, I navigated the backstage maze until I found a narrow staircase leading to a small upper level. At the end of a short hallway stood a door with peeling gold letters. A. Lenkov, Artistic Director. It was locked, of course. I removed a small leather case from my bag, a gift from my grandmother on my 21st birthday. Every lady should know how to pick a lock, she'd said with a wink. You never know when you'll need to make a dramatic entrance. Or exit, I thought, as I worked on the old lock until it clicked open. The office was smaller than I had imagined and thick with dust. Heavy velvet curtains blocked the windows, and the air had the stillness of a room unopened for decades. Bookcases lined the walls, filled with play scripts, theatrical reference books, and framed photographs. A massive oak desk dominated the center of the room, its surface buried under yellowing papers and production notes. I didn't have time to examine everything. According to Sophia's journal entries from 1963, what I needed would be hidden behind a specific book on the third shelf, a first edition copy of Stanislavski's An Actor Prepares. I found it exactly where she had described, and when I pulled it from the shelf, I heard a soft click. A small section of the bookcase swung inward, revealing a hidden safe. The combination was my grandmother's birthday, spelled out numerically. The heavy door swung open to reveal several bundles of letters, a small jewelry box, and a thick manila envelope. I took only the envelope, carefully closing the safe and replacing the book. What I needed wouldn't be in the love letters or jewelry Anton had gifted Sophia over their decades-long relationship. No, what I needed was in that envelope. Documents that Sophia had alluded to in her most cryptic journal entries. Documents that Anton had kept hidden in case the wolves ever came for the theater, as she had written. Back outside in the crisp autumn air, I ducked into a coffee shop across from the theater and opened the envelope. Inside were original architectural plans, correspondence with the city dating back to 1927, and most importantly, legal documents pertaining to the theater's construction and the land it stood on. Among them was a covenant signed by the original landowner, stipulating that the property could only be used for cultural and artistic purposes benefiting the public good for a period of 100 years from the date of the theater's opening. The Majestic had opened its doors on February 14, 1927. The covenant was valid for another 16 months. I immediately called my former professor from preservation law, Victoria Chen, now a senior partner at one of the city's most prestigious firms. Eliza, it's been ages, she answered warmly. How are you? I need your help, Victoria. I found something that might save the Majestic Theater. 2 hours later, I sat in Victoria's office on the 30th floor of a midtown skyscraper, watching her face as she examined the documents. This covenant appears legitimate, she said finally, looking up at me. But Davidson Development employs over 20 lawyers. They'll fight this with everything they have. Can they win? She tapped her pen against the desk. Honestly, maybe. These restrictive covenants can sometimes be overturned, especially when the original parties are deceased and the property has changed hands multiple times. They'll argue that conditions have changed, that the covenant no longer serves its original purpose. But we have a chance. Victoria leaned back in her chair. Yes, we have a chance. Especially if we can rally public support. Real estate developers hate bad publicity. Then let's give them some, I said. The next morning, I resigned from my position at the architectural firm. By afternoon, I had established Save the Majestic social media accounts and reached out to every preservationist, theater historian, and cultural journalist in my network. 3 days later, I stood on the steps of the Majestic as cameras flashed and microphones were thrust toward me. Behind me stood a group of allies I had hastily assembled: theater professionals, preservationists, community activists, and most powerfully, several legendary actors who had performed at the Majestic during its heyday. The Majestic isn't just a building, I told the gathered press. It's a living piece of our cultural heritage, and now we discovered that its destruction would not only be a tremendous loss to our city, but would violate a legally binding covenant protecting this site. I held up copies of the documents. Davidson Development was either unaware of or chose to ignore this covenant when they purchased the property. Either way, we intend to ensure it's enforced. The story caught fire faster than I had dared hope. By nightfall, it had made national news. #SaveTheMajestic was trending on social media, with celebrities and theater lovers worldwide sharing memories and photographs of performances at the historic venue. Richard Davidson issued a terse statement claiming that his legal team was examining the validity of recently discovered documents, but remained committed to bringing much-needed housing and retail space to the area. What happened next was the first surprise in a series of events I couldn't have scripted better myself. An anonymous source leaked emails from within Davidson Development revealing that they had, in fact, been aware of the covenant but had proceeded with purchase plans anyway, confident they could overturn it through legal maneuvering. The public outrage was immediate and fierce. Protesters gathered outside Davidson headquarters. Investors began questioning the company's tactics. The mayor, initially supportive of the development project, called for a review of the demolition permit. 10 days into our campaign, as I was giving an interview on the theater's steps, a black Tham car pulled up to the curb. Richard Davidson himself emerged, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my annual salary. "Ms. Montgomery," he called out, ignoring the reporters who swiveled to capture this unexpected confrontation. "A word, if you please." Against the whispered advice of my impromptu PR team, I approached him. Up close, Davidson was older than he appeared in corporate photographs, with lines of stress etched around his mouth and eyes. "You've caused quite a stir," he said, his voice low. "The covenant caused the stir, Mr. Davidson. I just brought it to light." He glanced at the cameras watching us from a distance. "Why don't we discuss this privately?" Inside the theater lobby, Davidson looked around with the calculating gaze of a man who saw square footage and potential return on investment rather than history or beauty. "I'll be direct, Ms. Montgomery. We're prepared to offer a compromise. We'll preserve the facade of the theater and incorporate a small performance space in the base of the new building. In return, you drop this covenant claim and publicly support the revised project." I laughed, the sound echoing off the marble walls. "That's not a compromise, Mr. Davidson. That's a consolation prize designed to make your company look benevolent while you destroy everything that matters about this place." His expression hardened. "Be reasonable. The economics don't work for preserving a 1,200-seat theater that sits empty most of the year. The land alone is worth." "I know exactly what it's worth," I interrupted. "But I also know what it's worth isn't measured solely in dollars. This theater was built to last centuries, not to be demolished after 9 decades because a developer wants to maximize profit margins." Davidson straightened his already perfect tie. "My lawyers are confident we can have this covenant invalidated." "Perhaps. But are you prepared for the months, possibly years, of litigation? The protests? The damage to your company's reputation while we fight this in court and the court of public opinion?" I stepped closer. "Did you know my grandmother was Sophia Montgomery?" A flicker of recognition crossed his face. "She performed here for decades," I continued. "She knew every inch of this building, every secret it held, including this covenant. She made sure I would find it when the time came." "What do you want?" Davidson asked finally. "I want you to sell the theater to a nonprofit preservation trust. At the price you paid for it, no profit." He laughed sharply. "Impossible." "Then I'll see you in court, Mr. Davidson. And every day we're in court, there will be protesters outside your sales offices, investors questioning your judgment, and the public watching a David versus Goliath story unfold, with you cast as Goliath." 2 weeks later, Davidson Development announced they were selling the Majestic Theater to the newly formed Montgomery Theater Trust for Historic Preservation, at cost. The press release cited the company's commitment to finding balanced solutions that honor our city's cultural heritage while addressing modern needs. Translation: They had calculated the cost of fighting and determined it wasn't worth the battle. The real work began after the victory headlines faded. Saving a theater from demolition was one thing. Restoring it to operational glory and financial sustainability was another challenge entirely. The theater needed millions in renovations, a viable business model, and programming that would attract modern audiences while honoring its historic significance. I had been prepared to spend years fundraising, applying for grants, and gradually restoring the venue. What I hadn't anticipated was the call from Jameson Hayes, the reclusive billionaire whose mother had been a costume designer at the Majestic during the 1950s. "I've been following your campaign," he said when I answered the unknown number. "You've done what everyone said was impossible." "We've only won the first act," I replied. "Restoration and sustainability are the next challenge. That's why I'm calling. I'd like to establish an endowment for the theater's restoration and ongoing operations. $50 million to start." I nearly dropped the phone. "Mr. Hayes, that's extraordinary. The Majestic gave my mother her start when no one else would hire a woman in technical theater. It's time to return the favor." He paused. "There's one condition." Of course there was a condition. There always was. The theater must be restored not just as a museum piece, but as a working venue that trains and employs the next generation of theater professionals. I don't want a pristine relic. I want a living, breathing cultural space that does for young artists today what it did for my mother 60 years ago. It was exactly what I had hoped for but hadn't dared articulate fully. Not just preservation of a building, but preservation of a mission, a purpose, a cultural contribution that would extend into the future. If you like this story, please write comment for next part.
I bought my car with the tuition money. If he wants to go, pay for it himself.
Laughing as he said this, Brian seemed completely unapologetic. How could he spend the money I saved for the tuition on a car? I was about to yell at him, but Paul grabbed my arm.
Okay.
Good. Glad you understand.
Paul answered with his head lowered. Satisfied, Brian laughed and started drinking. Paul glanced at him before heading into his room. Brian didn't notice, but I could see the anger burning in Paul's eyes. I followed Paul into his room. "Paul, about the tuition money."
It's fine. I've got some options, and if I have to, I'll work and earn it. I'll even work for the one person Dad can't stand.
With a sly grin, Paul showed his determination. Seeing that he wasn't about to back down, I promised to give him my full support. We too will let him know who he has turned against.
Yeah, I'll never forgive him.
We smiled as we started planning for what was to come. I'm Rachel, a 40-year-old working mom with a son, Paul, who's studying in high school for his college, and a husband, Brian, who works full-time at a company. I lost my parents in an accident when I was still a student. Because of that, I had to start working right after high school, and I've been with my current company for many years now. I met Brian when he was a client of the company I worked for.
Wait, Rachel, you like this game too?
Yeah, I do. At first, I didn't think much of it, but after meeting him a few more times, we started talking about personal stuff. Eventually, we discovered we played the same game, which brought us closer, and after he approached me, we started dating. When I got pregnant with Paul, we decided to get married.
I'm heading out with Paul for a bit.
Are you sure?
It's no big deal. You just take it easy, Rachel.
Brian is a bit assertive, but he always takes good care of me. Because of that, I felt comfortable relying on him.
Mom, it looked like it might rain, so I brought in the laundry and folded it.
Oh, thank you. On the other hand, Paul seems to have inherited my calm personality. He's never really had a rebellious phase, and avoids doing anything that would upset others. Before I know it, he's helping with household chores, and I'm always grateful for that.
Oh, Michelle said we should hang out again sometime.
Michelle did. Got it.
When that happens, let me know. I want to see Michelle too.
Brian has an older sister named Michelle. Michelle is a strong-willed, justice-driven person. Paul has always admired her and has said for years that he wants to follow the same path she did. I adore her as well, and marrying Brian has made me realize how lucky I am. I'm home. Wait, Brian's not here?
Oh yeah, doesn't seem like it.
When I got back from work, the only one at home was Paul, who was studying. Today wasn't supposed to be a late night or anything, so where on earth is he? Did you have dinner?
Don't worry about me. I ate just fine.
Since I had planned to come home late today, I'd prepared some meals in advance. I told them in the morning to heat it up and eat, and it seems Paul followed through.
I'll warm up your portion too, so go take a shower in the meantime.
Thanks. Taking Paul's advice, I went ahead and took a bath first. When I came back out, there was my reheated dinner along with a glass of wine. Paul had already gone back to his room. He really is such a thoughtful son. On the other hand, Brian didn't get home until hours later.
I'm back.
Despite it being the middle of the night, Brian came in drunk and yelling. I noticed the light still on in Paul's room and told Brian to quiet down. Hey, Paul's studying. Keep it down.
Shut up. Don't talk back to me, you low-educated woman.
I bit my tongue at Brian's words. It's true I didn't go far with my education, and I don't really care. However, I simply held back the urge to yell at him for his condescending attitude. Brian, oblivious to my reaction, sprawled out on the couch and started snoring immediately. You'll catch a cold, and it's not my problem. Muttering that, I went straight back to my room. The next morning, I glanced at Brian sleeping on the couch and started preparing breakfast.
Oh, why am I sleeping on the couch?
Ryan woke up a little later, looking somewhat annoyed. I explained to him that he had come home drunk in the middle of the night and fallen asleep on the couch. I've told you to let me know beforehand if you're going out drinking.
Yeah, sorry, my bad.
Brian gave me a dismissive reply to my words. I felt annoyed, but he went on getting ready as if he didn't care at all. Are you going out? What about breakfast?
I have to work overtime today. No time, so I'm heading out.
With that, Brian left. I let out a deep sigh.
Good morning, Mom.
Good morning. If I remember, you're eating lunch out today, right?
Yeah, that's right. I should be back by the evening, but I'll let you know if I'm running late.
After saying this, Paul ate his breakfast I'd prepared and even cleaned up afterward. The difference between those two is unbelievable. Brian could really learn a thing or two from Paul.
Hey, Mom, did you recently take up golf or something?
Golf? No, I didn't. Why are you asking? When I asked, Paul brought out a golf bag from somewhere. I widened my eyes at the sight of something unfamiliar. Where did that come from?
I found it in the yard. I thought it shouldn't get wet in the rain, so I brought it inside.
There's only one person who would do something like this. I couldn't help but feel exasperated. But I couldn't just ignore it, so I headed over to Brian, who was now lounging on the couch. "Brian, you spent our savings without asking, didn't you?"
Oh, the golf bag? Yeah, I've gotten into golf recently.
Brian answered without a hint of guilt. He's always been the type to spend our savings on expensive things without consulting me. The storage shed in the yard is already packed with things he's impulsively bought. It wouldn't be as bad if he used only his own earnings, but the fact that he dips into our joint account makes it a real problem. Enough is enough. You'll just lose interest and quit soon anyway.
This time it's different.
I've hidden Paul's college fund to keep it safe, but I have to figure out what to do. Thinking that, I let out another sigh. That evening, Michelle contacted me.
Sorry for calling out of the blue. How's Paul doing? Would he like to use some of my old study guides?
Thank you for thinking of him. I'll ask Paul and let you know. After hearing Michelle's offer, I asked Paul about it. He said he had something he wanted to ask Michelle, so I handed him my phone. While Paul was on the phone, I prepared some snacks.
Thanks, Mom. Here's your phone back.
Are you done? Take these snacks with you.
Thanks.
As I watched Paul head back to his room, I called Michelle again. Thank you so much for everything.
Don't worry about it. Also, I'll give that idiot a piece of my mind for you.
With that, she hung up. I wasn't sure what she meant, but I found out after Brian came home.
About the golf bag, I'm sorry.
Apparently, Michelle had heard about the situation from Paul and gave Brian a stern talking to. He seemed pretty shaken up, looking completely deflated. I told him there wouldn't be a next time, and silently thanked both Paul and Michelle in my heart. Sometime later, Paul's final exam of high school came. Paul himself seemed calm and collected, but I was so nervous that I couldn't sit still. When Paul finished his exam, he said he'd given it his best. He came out of his high school looking refreshed.
So do you think you'll get a good score?
Yeah, I scored myself, and I'm pretty sure I made the cut.
That's great.
Even Brian, who usually only thought about himself, seemed concerned about Paul today. It was probably partly because Michelle had scolded him.
By the way, are we okay on tuition and all that?
That's not a problem. I've saved up plenty. I showed him the balance of the hidden account I had been keeping for this purpose. Ryan's eyes widened at the amount, but I quickly hid it again before he could say anything. Paul received a university acceptance letter.
Oh, I did it.
That's great! Congratulations! As a result, Paul was accepted into the university of his desire. When I asked if he wanted to eat out, he said he preferred to eat at home, so I bought lots of groceries and headed back.
I'm home. Did you fail?
What kind of question is that? Paul passed just fine.
Oh, surprising. With a mother who only graduated high school, I didn't think he'd get into a prestigious college. Must be my genes.
Ryan's comment irritated me, but since today was a day of celebration, I chose to hold back. Paul worked hard for this. Soon, he'll be a college student.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen. I used the tuition money since I figured he'd fail anyway.
I froze for a moment, not understanding his words. What did you just say?
I said I already spent it. There was a car I wanted.
I immediately checked the account balance. The banking card wasn't in the hiding place, and I realized my mistake. It seemed Brian had seen where I'd hidden it.
I bought my car with the tuition money. If he wants to go, pay for it himself.
Laughing as he said this, Brian seemed completely unapologetic. How could he spend the money I saved for Paul's tuition on a car? I was about to yell at him, but Paul grabbed my arm.
Okay.
Good. Glad you understand.
Paul answered with his head lowered. Satisfied, Brian laughed and started drinking. Paul glanced at him before heading into his room. Brian didn't notice, but I could see the anger burning in Paul's eyes. I followed Paul into his room. Paul, about the tuition money.
It's fine. I've got some options, and if I have to, I'll work and earn it. I'll even work for the one person Dad can't stand.
With a sly grin, Paul showed his determination. Seeing that he wasn't about to back down, I promised to give him my full support. We too will let him know who he has turned against.
Yeah, I'll never forgive him.
We smiled as we started planning for what was to come. After securing the tuition money, Paul moved out to live near his university. Ryan, I want a divorce.
A divorce?
Ryan looked at me with a puzzled expression. I thought he might at least be a little upset, but that wasn't the case.
You, a high school graduate, think you can live on your own?
I make plenty of money.
Yeah, right, whatever. I can always get married again and you can suffer alone.
Laughing, he agreed to the divorce. And just like that, we divorced without much fuss. I packed my things and joined Paul. I'll be staying here for a while.
That's fine. Just, if I get a girlfriend, you'll have to make yourself scarce.
Oh, don't you have anyone nice yet?
Sadly, no.
For now, I plan to live with Paul. I then contacted Michelle. I've successfully evacuated.
I see. I'm so sorry about Brian.
This isn't your fault, Michelle. I had already told Michelle about Brian's behavior. From now on, the three of us would work together to get back at him. A few days later, once we had settled in, Michelle came to visit Paul.
All right, Paul, let me show you what it's like to work as a lawyer.
In fact, Michelle is a lawyer, and Paul aspires to become one. He planned to help out at her office with odd job while balancing his university studies. The three of us then headed to the house where Brian still lived.
What do you want now? Don't tell me you're here to wait, Michelle?
Hello, foolish Brian. We're coming in.
Ryan, who had been smirking at the sight of me, turned pale when he saw Michelle. Once inside, we found not only Brian, but also a young woman.
Well, she's.
I know all about her. Now I'll handle this as your lawyer.
Michelle, acting as the lawyer I had hired, began addressing Brian's infidelity and misuse of our savings. Confronted by Michelle, whom he couldn't stand, Brian became visibly flustered and couldn't form a coherent response.
So, regarding this matter, we'll be demanding compensation from you.
Wait, but we're family, and the affair happened after Rachel and I split up.
We've already investigated everything and know the full story. Paul, here.
With that, Michelle handed her attorney badge to Paul and rolled her shoulders.
All right, from here on out, I'm going to deal with Brian as his sister. It's going to get noisy, so why don't you two step outside?
At Michelle's suggestion, we left the house with smiles on our faces. I thought I heard a plea for help from behind us, but I ignored it.
See you later.
Michelle, with a dazzling smile, waved us off, and we smiled back before leaving.
Michelle really is amazing, isn't she?
She truly is. As screams echoed from inside the house, we chatted about how impressive Michelle was. The screams weren't only Brian's, a woman's voice was mixed in, meaning Michelle was probably dealing with his affair partner as well. We started chatting about which restaurant would be best to treat Michelle to a meal as a thank you. Paul was the first to notice the affair.
I'm usually at home studying, and Mom's here except when you're at work. So I guess Dad thought he could meet her outside without anyone noticing.
But Brian's plan didn't work. Paul occasionally went out for fresh air and happened to spot Brian with his affair partner. Realizing what was happening, Paul started gathering evidence.
Honestly, I've disliked Dad for a long time.
Really? I didn't know that. Paul explained that he used to like Brian when he was younger because they played together. But over time, Brian started treating me poorly, and when Paul stood up to him, Brian stopped interacting with him altogether. From then on, Paul's feelings toward Brian turned into dislike. Recently, they barely spoke to each other. Oh, so that's why he asked me about the golf bag. Even though he knew it couldn't possibly belong to me, he must have asked me because he didn't want to talk to Brian.
So, here's Dad's affair partner.
Oh, this woman. The woman in the photo Paul showed me from the affair scene looked familiar. She was one of my coworkers and currently in charge of handling business with Brian. I'll take care of investigating her.
Yeah, I'm counting on you.
With that, I decided to look into his affair partner myself. It turned out she was married, and I even identified her husband. I passed the information to her husband and also introduced him to Michelle.
Don't worry about the tuition money. I'll cover it as an investment in the future.
Michelle covered the tuition money that had been used up. She promised to recover not only the tuition money from Brian, but also all the funds he had misused over the years. Knowing this, we felt relieved, and Paul respected Michelle even more.
I want to be like Michelle someday.
You'll be fine, Paul. By the way, Michelle wasn't helping us so much just because her brother had caused trouble.
It's for my dear sister-in-law, so I'll do everything I can.
Just as I adore Michelle, she also treats me, her sister-in-law, like her own sister. We've had a close relationship, spending our days off together at cafes or shopping.
Besides, Rachel, you were such a big help to me back then.
Michelle is married but doesn't have children due to infertility. At first, she was devastated by the situation, and I supported her and her husband as much as I could. Michelle has always considered that a debt of gratitude, which is why she helps me and dotes on Paul so much. Honestly, I think she's already more than repaid me.
In that case, it's our turn to return the favor someday.
Since Paul said that, I nodded in agreement. For that reason, we needed to settle things with Brian as soon as possible, for the sake of our future. Muttering that, I steeled myself for what was ahead. Afterward, I successfully recovered both the alimony and the savings Brian had misused.
I'm truly sorry.
Brian didn't put up much resistance, likely because Michelle had come down hard on him. Hearing about the situation from Michelle, even Brian's parents apologized to me. Feeling responsible for the trouble Brian caused, they personally paid me additional compensation.
Wow, this place is amazing.
With that, I quickly decided to move out of Paul's place and into a secure apartment. Paul liked the apartment too, saying, "I'd love to live in a place like this once I start earning as a lawyer." As for Brian, he apparently wanted to apologize to me again, but Michelle stopped him.
If you've paid the alimony, don't ever show your face to her again. She's finally free of someone like you, so don't ruin Rachel's happiness.
She later laughed as she told me how she gave him another thorough dressing down. It seems that Brian kept both our divorce and his affair with my coworker a secret at work, but then the affair partner's husband showed up. He loudly exposed Brian's actions in the company lobby, making everyone at the company aware of what had happened. As a result, Brian was fired from his job. Additionally, my coworker was also dismissed after I reported her behavior to upper management, as it affected the company's reputation.
My parents were furious about the whole thing. Apparently, Brian went back to their house once, but they turned him away.
Brian sold the house to pay the alimony he owed me. When he tried to rely on his parents, they rejected him, leaving him with nowhere to go. So, what happened to Brian?
Even though this apartment has great security, if he waited outside my workplace, it'd still be a hassle for you, Rachel. So I sent him off to work at a factory I know.
Michelle arranged for Brian and his affair partner to work at a factory in the mountains. There were no buses or public transportation in the area, and the only way to get around was by a car. However, since both of them had sold their cars to pay the alimony, they didn't have one. If they tried walking, they risked encountering wild animals in the area. Moreover, the locals, informed by Michelle, were keeping an eye on them.
They've lived selfishly up until now. Losing their freedom is only fair.
Paul said so. Incidentally, Brian not only sold his car and house, but also all the items stored in the shed. However, due to poor storage conditions, most of the items sold for less than half their original value.
All right, I've got to do my best too.
Paul said with a smile. He's currently studying in the law department at his university while training under Michelle. His dream is to help people in need, just like I once was. Seeing his determination, I resolved to support him wholeheartedly from now on. With the issue with Brian finally resolved, I was able to focus more on my work. As a result, I earned a promotion.
That's amazing, Rachel.
It's all thanks to you, Michelle. So, how about we take a trip together sometime? Paul said we should go, just the two of us.
I'd love that. Thank you for still caring about me, even after everything with Brian.
I nodded with a smile at her words. According to Michelle, Brian is now working himself to the bone. He's reportedly struggling mentally since no one is willing to help him, and he's met with coldness wherever he turns. I heard that, unable to indulge in his favorite pastime of shopping, he's now stuck in a hopeless routine of just working every day.
Well, he brought it on himself. By the way, this little one is adorable.
Isn't she? I had been feeling lonely living alone again after so long. That's why I decided to get a cat. I was really fortunate to find a pet-friendly apartment available.
I love cats so much, but my husband isn't a fan, so I can't have one. Can I come over and visit sometimes?
Of course. Both the little one and I will always be waiting for you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Michelle and I remain as close as ever. In fact, without Brian in the picture, I feel like we've grown even closer.
Paul's working hard. He said he wants to make sure you don't have to worry anymore.
That makes me so happy. But can you keep an eye on him to make sure he doesn't overdo it?
Of course.
Paul seems to be doing well and is still working hard. He's striving every day to become a lawyer as soon as possible. Whenever I bring him food as a little treat, he looks so happy.
Living alone has taught me a lot. Doing everything myself is pretty tedious and tough. I thought I understood that from helping out before, but doing it every day is really hard.
Well, it's admirable that you're keeping up with it every day. But don't overdo it. Pushing yourself too much isn't good for your health.
When you say it, Mom, it really hits home.
I couldn't help but think how Paul had grown into such a good person, so unlike Brian. A few years later, Paul graduated from college and passed the bar exam. He's now working hard under Michelle, striving to become a fully fledged lawyer.
Hey, Rachel, guess what? Paul finally got a girlfriend.
Really? According to Michelle, Paul had been getting along well with a clerk who works at her law firm for some time. Eventually, the woman confessed her feelings to him, and that's how they started dating. Hearing this made me so happy. Thanks to Paul, I've been able to live a peaceful and happy life. That's why I want him to find his own happiness too. I'll have to let my son go. Hugging my cat, I muttered to myself. Not long after, Paul came to visit me with his girlfriend. Seeing the gentle-looking woman by his side made him look so happy. I'm sure Paul won't turn out like Brian and will always respect her feelings. From the bottom of my heart, I wish for Paul's happiness. While I was traveling with Lucas, Jonathan had brought a woman into the house. Sarah urged Jonathan to be with this woman.
I can't remarry her. She's the CEO's secretary. If this gets out, I'll lose my job. But if those two got into an accident or something and ended up dead, that'd be a different story. Honestly, they're such a nuisance. We really don't need that ugly wife or that idiot son around here anymore.
Exactly. Lucas is nothing like me. He's a low-educated fool. We don't need him. I wish they'd both just disappear forever.
Their conversation made my blood boil. I would never forgive these two. Lucas and I exchanged a glance and left the house silently. And so, like making a U-turn, we retraced our steps back down the road. I'll make those two pay. First, I needed to gather evidence. I worked with Lucas to hire a private investigator and began looking into Jonathan's behavior. I'm Monica, a 48-year-old stay-at-home mom. Right now, I live with my husband and our 2 children, making us a family of 4. My husband, Jonathan, graduated from a top university and works at a prestigious company. He's what you call a high achiever. On the other hand, I graduated from a community college and worked as a dietitian for about 2 years. However, after Jonathan and I had a match-made marriage, I stopped working altogether. Back when we got married 26 years ago, some women continued working after marriage, but I wanted to dedicate myself to my family and be a full-time homemaker. Jonathan felt the same way, and we both agreed on this path. A year after we got married, I gave birth to a baby boy. We named our first son Lucas. Since he was our first child, Jonathan doted on him. 2 years later, I gave birth to our second child, a baby girl. We were both thrilled because we'd been saying, It'd be great to have a girl next. Jonathan was completely smitten with his baby daughter. Looking back, that might have been the happiest time in our lives. But things started to change between us after that. We named our daughter Sarah. As Sarah grew older, she started to resemble Jonathan more and more. By the time she was about a year old, the resemblance was uncanny.
Sarah stood up. Sarah's walking. Sarah just called me Daddy.
His loving, hands-on parenting style is heartwarming to see. However, this affection was only directed at Sarah. By the time Lucas turned 3, Jonathan seemed to have lost interest in him entirely. Maybe it's natural for a father to find his daughter more endearing. I thought it was just a phase while she was little. But starting around the time Sarah turned 3 and became more aware, Jonathan's excessive doting only escalated. Sarah resembled Jonathan, not just in looks, but also in intelligence. Even before being taught, she started writing letters on her own and showed an interest in numbers. Seeing this, Jonathan was overjoyed. Overcome with excitement, he began teaching her addition and subtraction one after another. Whenever she was praised, Sarah would flash a proud smile. As her mother, I should have been happy about this. But at the same time, I started worrying about Lucas. Lucas was 5 years old. It was an age when he needed to spend more time playing with his dad, but Jonathan didn't pay any attention to him at all. Gradually, Lucas began to shut himself off from Jonathan. Instead, he started standing by my side in the kitchen, quietly watching me cook. At just 5, he seemed to develop an interest in cooking. I bought him a child-safe plastic knife. When I gave it to him, his face lit up with excitement as he mimicked me, cutting vegetables and fruit. But I didn't want to show favoritism toward Lucas, so whenever he started cooking, I always called Sarah into the kitchen too. However, Sarah would look uninterested and say,
"Mom, why did you call me?"
Hearing this, Jonathan would show up in the kitchen, glare at me, and yell,
Hey, what if Sarah cuts her finger? Don't make her do something so dangerous. She's only 3.
"I'm sorry. I just wanted her to watch." But Jonathan scooped Sarah up in his arms and quickly carried her to the living room. He made a point of saying loudly, "It's dangerous to stay here," in a gentle tone as he reassured Sarah. Lucas watched them with sad eyes. What should I say to comfort him? Jonathan's blatant favoritism for Sarah was becoming more obvious. If things continued like this, Lucas might end up with a deep emotional scar. I wanted to raise both siblings with equal love and care. For that, I needed Jonathan's cooperation. I struggled to find a solution. However, my concerns remained unresolved as time went by. Even after starting elementary school, Sarah felt a sense of superiority from being taught and praised by Jonathan. She went on to attend a private middle and high school, and eventually enrolled in the prestigious university Jonathan had attended. By then, Sarah had completely started looking down on me. Now, she and Jonathan treat me like a housemaid.
Hey, I told you I'd be leaving for school 30 minutes earlier today. Why isn't breakfast ready? Hurry up, you idiot.
Sarah always orders me around like this. Last night, she came home late from a party with her classmates, so I'm sure she didn't mention anything about this morning's schedule. I didn't hear anything about that. When did you say it?
Stop making excuses. Just get breakfast ready.
No matter what I say, Jonathan always takes Sarah's side and defends her. I have no choice but to hurriedly prepare breakfast, while the two of them sit at the table leisurely watching TV. When I serve the food, they both look displeased and complain about how I couldn't make anything better. For the record, Lucas left home 3 years ago after graduating high school, saying he wanted to become a chef. He was the only one who cared for me, and without him, there's no one left in this house who's on my side. However, ever since he was little, Lucas has loved cooking, and now he's training hard, determined to become a top chef. Thinking about that motivates me to keep pushing myself as well. Sarah may be academically gifted, but she's incapable of doing anything else. I've tried to involve her in household chores, but every time I did, Jonathan would interfere. The differences in our parenting values have created a deep rift between Jonathan and me, and now our entire family feels fractured. Of course, I've thought about divorce. While I can't ignore the fact that I bear some responsibility for the way Sarah has turned out, I can't let my family fall apart just because of my poor relationship with Jonathan. So, I've come to accept this as an ordinary family issue and decided to continue living like this. After graduating university, Sarah got a job at the same company as Jonathan. To the outside world, we probably look like a happy family with a successful daughter following in her father's footsteps. But the truth is, Jonathan and Sarah's treatment of me has gotten even worse. Being ordered around by the two of them, both working at prestigious companies, makes me feel less like a housemaid and more like a slave. I've become gaunt, and my hair has started graying and falling out badly. Even though we're financially stable, I'm so busy that I don't have time for skincare or trips to the salon. Even when no one else is home, I'm told to clean every corner of the house thoroughly and polish every single glass for their evening drinks. They also nitpick every detail about the laundry and meal preparations. Every day, I work until I'm utterly exhausted. Then one day, during a weekday afternoon, Lucas came back home.
Mom, I'm home. Actually, this is the first time I've been able to take a proper break since becoming a chef. So, to learn more about the culinary world, I've booked a 3-night stay at a hotel as a guest. It's for 2 people, so why don't you come with me?
Lucas said happily. Since it was a weekday afternoon, I was the only one at home, but I couldn't help feeling uneasy about him making such a decision without consulting anyone. If Jonathan and Sarah find out about me going on a trip with you, they might get angry. When I expressed my concern, Lucas looked worried and responded,
That's why I waited for a time when neither of them would be around to ask you. Remember about a month ago when I came home just to pick up some things? I saw how exhausted you looked back then.
Apparently, he had noticed. Lucas had realized how much mistreatment I'd been enduring from the two of them since he left. Concerned for me, he had made plans so I could leave the house for just 3 days.
Don't worry, I'll call Dad later and smooth things over. Mom, you need to take a break every once in a while.
I was so touched by Lucas' thoughtfulness that I couldn't hold back my tears. After explaining the plan, Lucas quickly left to return to work. Honestly, I still felt uneasy. Will Jonathan really allow this? But for now, I decided to trust Lucas' words. That night, it seemed Jonathan had received a call from Lucas, as he immediately asked me about the hotel. However, contrary to my worries, neither Jonathan nor Sarah seemed to care at all.
Lucas told me about it. He even mentioned the destination. Oh, that hotel? Sarah and I have been to all the luxury hotels around here, so we know it. Honestly, I doubt people like you, who can't even appreciate fine taste, would get much out of it.
Exactly. Well, I suppose we can let you slack off from housework for 3 days.
While they didn't oppose my staying at the hotel, their usual snide tone was still present. Even so, I accepted their remarks without reacting. Thank you. In that case, I'll take you up on your kind offer and take 3 days off. It felt like asking a boss for vacation time, but with those two, such politeness was necessary. If anything, I had expected them to show more displeasure about me leaving the house, but I found it odd how easily they approved. It felt a bit strange, but I decided not to overthink it and enjoy the rare opportunity for my trip. And during those 3 days at the hotel, I spent peaceful and relaxing time with Lucas. It's been decades since I've had such a luxurious time without worrying about chores or being criticized by anyone. Feeling refreshed and in a good mood after shaking off my daily exhaustion, I returned home with Lucas, who still had 1 day of vacation left. I thought he could rest at home for a day since the trip had been tiring for him. It was late at night, so I figured Jonathan and Sarah were probably already asleep. With that in mind, I quietly opened the front door and entered the house, careful not to make any noise. But then, I heard Jonathan and Sarah laughing in the living room. Realizing they were still awake, I decided to step in, but just as I was about to, their conversation stopped me in my tracks.
So, what do you think of her? Thanks to that ugly wife being gone, she cleaned and even cooked for us yesterday and today. She's a real catch, isn't she?
Totally. She's way better at cooking than her ugly maid. And she even taught me some makeup tricks. Dad, why don't you just be with her instead?
Her? Who are they talking about? Could Jonathan be having an affair? I wanted to rush in and confront them immediately, but Lucas grabbed my arm from behind and held me back.
Don't. Let's wait a little longer and catch him red-handed.
Lucas whispered softly. He was right, so I stayed put and listened carefully.
I can't remarry her. She's the CO's secretary. If this gets out, I'll lose my job. But if those two got into an accident or something and ended up dead, that'd be a different story. Honestly, they're such a nuisance. We really don't need that ugly wife or that idiot son around here anymore.
Exactly. Lucas is nothing like me. He's a low-educated fool. We don't need him. I wish they'd both just disappear forever.
How could they? Their conversation made my blood boil. I would never forgive these two. Lucas and I exchanged a glance and left the house silently. And so, like making a U-turn, we retraced our steps back down the road. Our destination was Lucas' apartment in the neighboring town, where he lived alone. For now, I'll stay there and make those two pay. First, I needed to gather evidence. The woman Jonathan had brought into our home was, as he mentioned, the CO's secretary, and he was worried about the company finding out. He was most likely having an affair. Working with Lucas, I hired a private investigator to look into Jonathan's activities. Once I've gathered all the evidence, I'll slap him with divorce papers. With that thought in mind, I steadily began making preparations. One day, about 6 months later, while having breakfast with Lucas and watching a morning news program on TV, a shocking piece of news caught my attention. There had been a fire at our house just moments ago. Lucas and I rushed over, but fortunately, the damage was minimal, and the fire had been quickly extinguished. It was covered on a local news segment, likely because it was a minor incident, but still caught attention. However, Sarah was clearly terrified and was crying her eyes out. As soon as she spotted me, she rushed over in a panic.
Mom, it was so scary.
What happened, Sarah? You're still in your pajamas. Sarah clung to me, sobbing, her pajamas rumpled and her hair a mess. When I asked for details, Sarah explained that she woke up feeling hungry and decided to heat something from the fridge in the microwave. However, she put it in the microwave still wrapped in aluminum foil and turned it on. Not knowing how long to heat it, she set the timer for a full 10 minutes. Naturally, the microwave caught fire, and it turned into a minor blaze. Sarah didn't even know how to use a microwave, let alone cook. She had never lifted a finger to help around the house, leaving everything to me, so it was no surprise. Through her tears, Sarah said,
Mom, I had no idea housework was this hard. I can't do something this annoying, so please come back now. And why did you suddenly leave home anyway? It doesn't make any sense.
That's right, Monica. I thought you'd come back after your trip, but you haven't contacted us since. You even ignored my calls. What's the meaning of this?
Jonathan and Sarah glared at me with intense fury. These two should have been struggling in my absence, yet they showed no signs of remorse. Deciding they no longer deserved my sympathy, I stood my ground and responded in a firm tone. Why don't you think about that yourselves? In any case, I have no intention of returning to this house. I'll be back with divorce papers, so be prepared.
Wait, divorce? What are you thinking? I won't allow it.
Jonathan yelled angrily, but I ignored him and left with Lucas. Even as they shouted, "Wait a minute," we didn't look back. The next day, I returned to the house with divorce papers and a bag full of documents. Over the past 6 months, I had gathered plenty of evidence. No matter how much Jonathan tried to explain, I was confident I could prove his infidelity. When I arrived at the house, I didn't bother ringing the doorbell. I unlocked the door and walked in. But the sight that greeted me stopped me in my tracks. The house was overflowing with clutter, leaving no place to step, and a foul odor filled every room. Even though it was the middle of winter, flies were buzzing around everywhere. Has Jonathan's mistress not been here since then? As I stood there thinking, Jonathan appeared from the back of the house.
You finally come back. But let me tell you, I'm not agreeing to a divorce. If you insist on separating, you'll have to pay me alimony as punishment for abandoning the house and leaving us.
That's not going to happen. I have all this evidence of your affair, gathered by a private investigator. Furious at his unreasonable demands, I pulled out a stack of documents and photos from the envelope and scattered them in front of Jonathan. Among them were pictures of him arm in arm with a beautiful woman, walking out of a hotel. Jonathan picked up one of the photos and burst into loud laughter.
And what about it? Compared to you irresponsibly abandoning your family, this is nothing. I'm a senior manager at my company. It's only natural that young coworkers look up to me.
Oh, really? Can you honestly call that admiration, Dad?
Lucas, what are you doing here?
Jonathan was shocked to see Lucas suddenly appear, especially since it was a holiday and Lucas was supposed to be busy at work. I was just as surprised, never expecting Lucas to show up, and I couldn't help but wonder why he had come. Lucas, why are you here? Isn't the restaurant busy today?
Mom, I can't just focus on work when something this big is happening. I've moved up the ranks, so I can take emergency leave when needed.
With a proud expression, Lucas pulled his phone out of his pocket. He then showed Jonathan a video playing on the screen. The moment Jonathan saw it, his face turned pale, and he asked,
When was this filmed?
The video showed Jonathan having a conversation with his mistress at an upscale restaurant. It appeared Jonathan had invited her, but the woman seemed reluctant. As I listened, it became clear that Jonathan was trying to convince her to come back to his house to clean again. However, she was disgusted after seeing the state of the house, which hadn't been cleaned in months. She firmly stated that she never wanted to set foot in Jonathan's house again. Even so, Jonathan persistently pressured her. Eventually, she snapped, yelling, "Shut up," before shaking off Jonathan's desperate grip on her arm and storming out. Watching the entire scene, it was clear just how infatuated Jonathan was with her. This was undeniable proof of his affair. Despite looking embarrassed by his pathetic behavior being exposed, Jonathan turned to Lucas and started questioning him.
How on earth did you record this? That restaurant is one of the most exclusive in the area. Someone like you wouldn't even be able to set foot inside.
Lucas and I burst out laughing.
Really? Don't you even know where I work, Dad? I'm a chef at that restaurant now.
That's right. Jonathan, you've been so focused on Sarah that you didn't even bother to find out where your accomplished son is working.
Wait, Lucas works at such a high-end place? No way.
Yes, Lucas had been recognized for his experience and training at various establishments and was now a chef at the finest restaurant in the region. It turns out that this restaurant is occasionally used by underground organizations, so security cameras are installed in the private dining rooms as a precaution. The video was captured by one of those cameras in the private room where they were dining. Lucas had asked the restaurant manager to save the footage to his phone so it could be used as evidence in case the divorce proceedings between Jonathan and me became contentious. The investigator confirmed that Jonathan's mistress was indeed the CEO secretary at his company. They had been secretly seeing each other for over 2 years, careful not to let the company find out. Faced with undeniable evidence, Jonathan slumped in defeat.
Damn it. I was planning to divorce Monica after making her pay alimony for irresponsibly abandoning the house. Then I could have hired cleaners and gotten back together with her.
I was dumbfounded by Jonathan's audacity. Even though he had admitted defeat, his blatant honesty was appalling. Who would ever pay alimony to such a man? Anyway, you're the one who's going to pay alimony. Now that you've come to terms with it, sign this divorce paper. Jonathan looked like he was on the verge of tears and glanced toward the back of the house. Then, as if summoning the last of his strength, he shouted,
Sarah, please come here. I need your help.
Even now, he was trying to get Sarah on his side. Come to think of it, despite all the commotion, Sarah hadn't shown herself yet. There was no response to Jonathan's calls at first, but he kept calling her name repeatedly. Finally, Sarah came down from the second floor, looking annoyed.
I've told you not to bother me. Just handle the divorce stuff with Mom on your own.
Well, I'm sorry, but I don't know what to do anymore.
Jonathan had always depended on Sarah for everything. In his moment of desperation and panic, he instinctively turned to her for help. However, Sarah was a daughter who had been spoiled by Jonathan her entire life. There was no way she would step up just because he was in trouble. Then, perhaps wanting to avoid getting entangled in the mess, Sarah began voicing her own opinions.
Fine, but make sure this divorce doesn't affect my life. If the company finds out my parents divorced because Dad had an affair with the CEO's secretary, I'll lose my reputation.
What? Is that how you talk to your father who raised you?
Jonathan and Sarah quickly turned on each other, bickering furiously. Sarah's comment sparked an idea in my mind. That's it. If you don't agree to pay alimony and sign the divorce papers, I'll show the video to the CEO. At this, Jonathan and Sarah turned pale.
Wait, please don't do that.
Yes. If anyone finds out Dad had an affair with the secretary, I won't be able to show my face at work either.
Jonathan and Sarah began apologizing desperately. I exchanged a glance with Lucas and muttered, "What should we do?" Lucas, looking down at Jonathan, replied with a sarcastic tone,
Well, what should we do? If you sign the divorce papers and agree to pay alimony, we won't show the video to anyone.
Fine, I don't have a choice. For the sake of my job, I'll pay the alimony. Just don't show that video to anyone.
Jonathan agreed begrudgingly. Relieved that the situation was resolved, Sarah let out a smile.
If that's the case, make sure to call a cleaning service and have this house thoroughly cleaned. There's no way I'm staying in such a filthy place with you, Dad.
Oh, that won't be necessary. This house is being sold anyway. Sarah let out a gasp of surprise at my words. This house was built jointly under Jonathan's and my names after our marriage. Since we were divorcing, it would be subject to division of property, and I planned to sell the house and split the proceeds. When I explained this, Sarah suddenly burst into tears.
What? Then where am I supposed to live?
You're earning a good salary, Sarah. It's about time you started living on your own. At the mention of living alone, Sarah's face turned pale again.
No way. I can't live by myself. Who will wake me up in the morning? And as for food, I've always relied on Dad to either buy groceries or take me out to eat. I can't do anything on my own.
I was so exasperated I was at a loss for words. Even after I left, Sarah relied on Jonathan to wake her up, and she can't even shop for food herself. As her mother, I was stunned to realize just how spoiled she had become under Jonathan's indulgence. While Sarah sobbed, Jonathan tried to comfort her in a gentle tone.
Don't worry, Sarah. I'll find a nice apartment for us to live in together so you won't have to feel inconvenienced.
Jonathan stroked Sarah's head as he spoke. This seemed to cheer Sarah up, and she smiled warmly at Jonathan. But I couldn't hold back my frustration any longer and shouted at them like a thunderclap. Enough, both of you. Jonathan, don't you see that you've spoiled Sarah since she was a child? That's why she's grown into an adult who can't do anything on her own. And Sarah, if you keep depending on Jonathan like this, you'll never be able to get married. My harsh scolding left them both staring down at the floor. Lucas, taking the opportunity to drive the point home, added,
That's right. Even my friends used to complain about Sarah. Whenever they came over, they'd say she was selfish and unbearable. If you don't fix that spoiled attitude now, no guy will ever want to date you.
Sarah's face twisted in discomfort at Lucas' words. Even Jonathan, who had always doted on Sarah, looked genuinely concerned about her future for the first time. The two of them stood up. Then Jonathan spoke to Sarah in a gentle, instructive tone.
All right, Sarah. Let's find a place where you can live on your own. I'll help you find it, but after that, you'll need to handle things yourself.
Sarah nodded quietly. Once the two had calmed down, I handed Jonathan the divorce papers, and he signed them. Afterward, we agreed to discuss alimony and property division through our lawyers. With everything settled, Lucas and I left the house. I'm not sure if Sarah will truly be able to become independent, but that's something only she can decide for herself. Thinking this, I headed home with Lucas. After discussions through lawyers, I received $30,000 in alimony from Jonathan for his affair, finalized the division of assets, and our divorce was completed. For the time being, I plan to stay at Lucas' apartment. That said, I also have my dietitian's license, so I decided to look for a job and become independent. After all, having urged Sarah to stand on her own, I couldn't continue relying on Lucas forever. With this in mind, I started visiting employee services and studying toward a new goal. I quickly found a job and now work as a dietitian at a hospital. My days are filled with work and studying at night. Amidst this busy routine, I received a call from Jonathan on my phone. I wondered what he wanted after all this time and answered, only to hear his sniffling voice.
Monica, please help me.
What's wrong? Why are you calling so late at night? I was in the middle of studying and found it rather bothersome, but I asked what had happened anyway. Here's what Jonathan told me. He thought his affair with the CEO's secretary hadn't been exposed at work. However, after breaking things off with her at that restaurant, she started sharing details about their relationship with others in the company. Apparently, she was a favorite of the CEO and unlikely to face any serious repercussions. Instead, the CEO was furious at Jonathan for having a relationship with his trusted secretary. Jonathan was called into the CEO's office and immediately fired. Jonathan burst into tears on the spot, desperately apologizing. However, it seemed the CEO's decision was final. Jonathan lost his job because of his affair. The repercussions extended to Sarah, who worked at the same company. After moving out on her own, she had developed a habit of oversleeping and was frequently late for work. Naturally, this had already put her under scrutiny from her superiors. When rumors about her father's affair spread throughout the office, it made her work environment unbearable. Eventually, Sarah couldn't take it anymore and resigned voluntarily. Jonathan tearfully explained all of this over the phone, begging me to reconcile because he couldn't manage on his own anymore. He was probably hoping to rely on Lucas' income from working at a top-tier restaurant. However, I had no intention of getting back together with him, so I quickly replied, "I'm too busy to even think about reconciling. You should hurry up and find a job to support Sarah. You're good at spoiling her, aren't you?"
But it's nearly impossible to find a decent job at my age over 50. Please, I'm begging you to help me.
Jonathan protested, but I truly was busy and couldn't be bothered. Ignoring his pleas and tears, I hung up the phone. After that, I blocked both Jonathan and Sarah's numbers. I also informed Lucas to do the same. Jonathan and Sarah, unable to get in touch with me or Lucas. Desperate due to their struggles, the two eventually showed up uninvited at Lucas' restaurant. As soon as they saw Lucas, they launched into their usual apologies. The two seemed to have been jumping from job to job in search of work, but Jonathan was unable to get hired anywhere he wanted. The CEO of Jonathan's former company was well connected in the area, and word had spread to other companies that Jonathan had been fired due to his affair. Jonathan, with his naturally high pride, would get angry at his younger supervisors, cause conflicts, and repeatedly end up getting fired. Sarah, on the other hand, managed to find a job quickly. However, she was deemed unreliable without Jonathan by her side and couldn't keep her positions for long. She eventually took on part-time work as well, but it ended the same way. She was seen as unfit and quit soon after. That's why they came to Lucas, asking to start over as a family. They even begged him to hire them at the restaurant, with Jonathan saying he'd settle for washing dishes. Lucas wasn't in a position to make such decisions, so he referred the matter to his manager. The manager came out, listened, and told them the restaurant couldn't hire them. Dejected, Jonathan and Sarah left the restaurant. The next time I heard about them was on the local news. This time, the two of them went to the CEO secretary's apartment, accusing her of being responsible for Jonathan's dismissal and harassing her repeatedly. After doing this multiple times, she eventually reported them, and both of them were taken into custody. It's hard to imagine anyone else falling so far from a once privileged life. As for me, I passed the national exam to become a registered dietitian while continuing to work. I had been living at Lucas' place, but now I felt ready to stand on my own. With that in mind, I started looking for an apartment where I could live on my own, but Lucas tried to stop me, saying there was no need for me to move out. But I shook my head and replied, "I can't do that. You're getting married soon, and I don't want to be a burden to you and your wife." Yes, Lucas was about to marry the woman he'd been dating. The woman he's with is a wonderful person. That's why I want to stand on my own, so I can quietly watch over his happiness from a distance. When I explained my feelings to Lucas, he understood.
All right. But when I have kids, Mom, you'd better come over right away to hold your grandchild. We'll be waiting for you.
Lucas' words made me so happy. I've just turned 50. Looking forward to my grandchildren that will one day come, I made a vow to myself to continue on the path to independence.
You're not just useless, you're ugly too. Do I really have to look at someone like you every day from now on? I shouldn't have rushed into marrying you.
After marrying Richard, he suddenly began saying such cruel things to me. The Richard who used to cherish me before our marriage was nowhere to be found. Is this how much someone can change after getting married? Just as I was growing more distrustful, I discovered the real reason behind Richard's change in behavior. My name is Jennifer, and I'm 30 years old. I've been dating Richard, who is 2 years younger and worked at the same office, for 5 years now. On our 5th anniversary, he proposed to me at a fancy hotel restaurant. Now, we're making progress together on introducing our families, planning the wedding, and searching for a new home. He was assigned to the same administrative department as me about 2 years after joining the telecommunications company where I currently work as a new graduate. He was so obedient and adorable, always doing exactly what his seniors asked, like a loyal puppy. At first, I just watched him from afar, but before I knew it, he started talking to me more and more.
Jennifer, what's your favorite food? Also, is there anything you don't like?
He would take any chance during breaks at work to ask me those kinds of questions. I like pancakes. As soon as I gave a simple answer, he would spend that day's break researching restaurants.
I found a place with the amazing pancakes. Want to go after work?
Then, with his eyes sparkling, he would show me pictures of the restaurant on his phone. Even before he confessed his feelings, I already had a sense that he liked me.
When I first saw you, Jennifer, I just knew. You're the one. I promise to cherish you forever. If it's okay, will you be my girlfriend?
When Richard confessed his feelings during our 3rd date, I was genuinely happy. Thank you. Actually, I kind of had a feeling you'd confess to me today. Hearing that, his face turned an even deeper shade of red, and he looked down. That expression was so adorable and endearing. Even now, 5 years into our relationship, Richard's proactive gestures and sweet demeanor haven't changed. Every year on my birthday or our anniversaries, he surprises me with jewelry I had mentioned wanting or takes me out to a fancy dinner. The warm smile he shows when I'm happy is something I absolutely adore. So, when he proposed, I didn't hesitate to say yes. I believe that with someone who cherishes me so much, I could have a happy married life.
However, shortly after our engagement, Richard's behavior suddenly changed. Since we wanted to start living together as soon as possible after getting engaged, we decided to begin living together before our wedding, moving in and registering our marriage at the same time. All that was left was to have the wedding ceremony. But it was around this time that Richard's behavior completely shifted. For some reason, he started ignoring me whenever I spoke to him. "Hey, I'm thinking about our wedding." When I tried to discuss it, he turned his back to me and replied coldly,
I'm tired right now. Let's talk later.
At home, he was constantly playing games on his phone, and there were no conversations between us. The atmosphere in the house was cold, far from what you'd expect from newlyweds. "Where should we go this weekend?"
I'm tired. Let me just relax at home.
Whenever I tried to talk to him, he would only respond in a lethargic tone. Before we got married, he had been cheerful and active, but now he seemed like a completely different person. The only reason I could think of was that Richard had been transferred from the admin department to the sales department after our marriage. Starting our married life and learning a new role at work must have been overwhelming for him. So I thought he might be feeling overwhelmed or pressured by the start of our new life together and all the unfamiliar challenges. And I decided to support Richard patiently with understanding. However, Richard's behavior toward me only escalated further. He would sigh in annoyance as he looked at the dining table.
You haven't even started cooking yet? You're so useless.
"I'm sorry. I had to work late today and I just got home. I'll start now, so please wait a little longer." When I said that, Richard's expression became even more annoyed.
You're not just useless, you're ugly too. Do I really have to look at someone like you every day from now on? I shouldn't have rushed into marrying you.
What? Is this the same kind and gentle person I once knew? I wasn't angry or sad. I was simply in disbelief. Richard had always treated me with care and had never said anything so cruel, not even during arguments. But from that day on, his attitude toward me only got worse. He started calling me old hag and yelling, "Hurry up! You're so slow!" while rushing me to finish the housework and cooking. I began seriously considering calling off my marriage to Richard. However, with the ceremony scheduled for next month, canceling now would mean paying a hefty cancellation fee. More importantly, it would cause confusion and upset among our family and relatives who were excitedly looking forward to our wedding. What should I do? Is it even okay to consider divorce at this point? While I was struggling with these worries, my younger sister, Emma, called me. Emma, 3 years younger than me, works as a dermatologist. It was rare to receive a call from Emma. Since graduating from medical school, she hadn't contacted me, saying she was too busy with work. "It's been a while. How have you been? Is work going well?" When I answered the phone, Emma spoke in a somber voice.
"Yeah, well, work's going fine."
Her voice clearly sounded like she was feeling down. "Did something happen?"
"I don't know, but lately, I feel like someone's been following me after work."
According to Emma, she'd noticed a shadowy figure near the staff entrance of her clinic. And that figure apparently follows her as she walks to the station. Once she reaches the station, it blends into the crowd, and she loses sight of it. This has been going on for about a month. Even after discussing it with her clinic director and adjusting her work hours, the figure still appeared every time. When she consulted the police, they said they couldn't take action because there was no actual harm, and only promised to increase patrols near the clinic. Emma, who has been entirely focused on her career and has little experience with relationships, said she had no idea who the stalker could be. Hearing her story, I became deeply worried. It might not seem harmful now, but if you ignore it, you could end up in danger. Let's hire a private investigator to look into this. I'll go with you.
A private investigator. Yeah, you're right. It's better to get this thoroughly checked out.
After Emma's sudden call, I couldn't stop worrying about her. Before I realized it, all my concerns about my marriage to Richard had completely disappeared. 2 weeks later, I was shocked when I read the investigator's report. I recognized the face of the man in the photos. No, it wasn't just recognition. It was the face I saw every day when I came home. The person stalking Emma was my husband, Richard. You've got to be kidding. Why? I covered my mouth in disbelief, while Emma stared wide-eyed at the photos, completely stunned. I don't even remember what we talked about after that. Starting the next day, I threw myself into work as if nothing had happened. At home, I knew I'd lose control and lash out at Richard, so I stayed at a business hotel near my office for about a week. With the wedding to Richard just around the corner, I knew I couldn't keep running away from reality, so I reluctantly gathered my resolve and returned home. How should I bring this up? I froze with my hand on the doorknob. When I finally opened the door, Richard was sitting on the couch, staring blankly into space. When he noticed me, he didn't ask where I'd been. Instead, he started talking.
Good timing. I need to tell you something. I've fallen in love with someone else. I want you to let me go.
That someone else. It's Emma, isn't it? I thought it, but couldn't say it out loud. Seeing my stunned reaction, he continued.
But canceling the wedding would cost a lot, and there's family pride to consider. Let's have the ceremony and then divorce after a little while.
How selfish can you be? Why? If you didn't love me, why did you propose? When I asked, he muttered softly.
After I proposed to you, I met an incredibly attractive woman. She's beautiful, successful, and completely out of my league, but I fell for her, and I got her pregnant. So I'm going to take responsibility and leave you.
That one sentence made everything clear. Richard had fallen for Emma the moment he saw her at our family meeting. It's true that Emma is far more beautiful than me, and as a dermatologist, she earns a high income. She's the kind of person anyone could fall for at first sight. But what about the baby? Emma didn't mention anything like that, and she was upset about being followed. What's really going on? I was so overwhelmed. I didn't know what to believe anymore. One thing was certain. I couldn't stay with Richard any longer. I decided without hesitation to end things with him. But the wedding is just around the corner. I don't have the slightest energy left to cancel it or explain the situation to my relatives. And so I ended up going along with the flow and facing the wedding day. A few days later, the wedding took place, and for me, it was nothing short of hell. We exchanged fake vows of eternal love despite not loving each other, and I watched as our parents were moved to tears. The ceremony went smoothly, but my heart felt like it was going to shatter. I couldn't bring myself to let Emma attend, so I told everyone she had an urgent patient and had her stay away. It would have been better to pay the hefty cancellation fee. I should have explained everything to our relatives. But it was too late for regrets. I cried out of sadness, though everyone probably thought they were tears of joy. The day after the wedding, I couldn't take it anymore and began calling our families and relatives one by one. Could you all gather? I have something important to discuss. When everyone assembled, Richard looked startled.
What's going on?
I hadn't told Richard, who was clearly confused, that I had invited all our families and relatives. Once everyone was gathered, I made my declaration. I'm getting a divorce. Richard has said terrible things to me ever since we started living together, and it's broken my spirit. I want my life back. My mom and aunt voiced their concern.
What happened? Why all of a sudden? Did something happen?
Richard's parents, Susan and Peter, were furious.
A divorce? Are you kidding me? It's the day after your wedding.
Exactly. No matter what the reason is, divorcing the day after your wedding is completely unreasonable.
Sure, we had talked about breaking up due to incompatibility, but to go ahead and gather all our families and relatives the day after the wedding to announce a divorce? Are you kidding me? Doing something like this so casually, there's something seriously wrong with you.
Richard criticized me harshly. You're the last person who should be saying that. I wanted to shout back, but held my tongue. Instead, I played the audio recordings on my phone.
Old hag, you haven't made dinner yet? Hurry up, you slowpoke.
The recording captured every instance of Richard belittling me and pressuring me to finish the housework and cooking. Since Richard started treating me so poorly, I'd secretly recorded his words just in case something like this happened.
Calling Jennifer an old hag? What are you, a rebellious teenager?
Aren't you both working? If that's the case, getting upset just because dinner's a bit late seems unnecessary.
The relatives began pointing out how harsh Richard's words were. Even Susan and Peter, who had been angry moments ago, suddenly fell silent. Richard was usually known to be calm and gentle, never acting this cruel toward family or relatives. Everyone in the room froze, clearly taken aback by the situation.
You've always been such a calm and understanding person. For you to get this upset, there must be some kind of reason, right?
Exactly. I've never seen Richard raise his voice like this. Did Jennifer do something awful to you?
They looked at Richard as they spoke.
No, not really. There's no specific reason.
Richard's response was hesitant, and his eyes darted around nervously, showing his clear unease. Since Richard wouldn't clearly state the reason for our divorce, I stepped in to explain. You've fallen for someone else, haven't you? You don't care about me anymore, and seeing me just makes you irritated, right? As I spoke, I spread the private investigator's report across the table. There, in the photos, was Richard stalking Emma.
What's this? Are you using binoculars to spy on someone's house?
Wait, isn't that Emma's apartment where she lives alone?
The relatives examined the photos curiously while my mom screamed.
What is this?
Shouting, Richard frantically tried to gather the photos.
Could this be an affair?
No, it's more like stalking.
The relatives stared at Richard with puzzled and suspicious expressions. By this point, there was no escape for him. At that moment, the front door, which had been left unlocked, opened.
Sorry, my shift ran late, so I got here later than planned.
Emma walked into the room as she apologized. The relatives, looking concerned, turned their eyes to Emma, as if wanting to say something. But none of them seemed to know what to say.
What's going on?
Emma looked confused, but no one said a word. Richard suddenly began crying and pleading with Emma.
Emma, why are you ignoring me? We promised to raise our child together and live happily. This is cruel.
What?
Emma muttered softly, looking utterly bewildered.
I'm your partner. We met in the wrong order because of fate, but I'm leaving her so we can be together. Emma, will you marry me?
Richard dropped to his knees in front of Emma and proposed on the spot. Everyone in the room was dumbfounded, unable to process what was happening.
I'm sorry to say this in front of everyone, but are you out of your mind? You kept coming to my clinic without any reason, so much so that the director had to ban you. You stalked me endlessly and kept stuffing creepy poems into my mailbox. On top of that, claiming I'm pregnant with your child and that I'm your partner. Enough with the lies.
Emma gave Richard a big slap in the face.
I've never even touched you. Even an elementary schooler knows you can't get pregnant just by being stared at from afar.
Everyone was stunned, and some of the relatives, finding the situation amusing, began recording it on their phones. Susan and Peter looked like they were about to burst into tears, utterly at a loss, while Richard's other relatives sighed heavily.
This is ridiculous.
Work it out between yourselves.
As the relatives began leaving, Peter shouted at Richard,
You disgrace. When did your thinking become so completely irrational? Apologize to Jennifer and Emma right now. I never imagined Richard could be this foolish, and I'm deeply sorry for saying such terrible things to you, Jennifer.
Peter apologized to Emma and me along with Richard. Richard, on the verge of tears, muttered,
Emma loves me. We're destined to be together.
It was clear he was still trapped in his delusions. Enough already. We're getting divorced, and I never want to see your face again.
If you come near me again, I'll call the police.
Emma and I glared at him as we said this.
I'm truly sorry for saying such terrible things to you without understanding the situation, Jennifer.
Peter grabbed Richard by the collar, cutting off whatever he was trying to say, and dragged him out of the house and back home. A few days later, I was able to finalize my divorce from Richard through Susan and Peter's mediation.
This is the least we can do to apologize. Please accept it.
What he handed me was a substantial amount of alimony. There were payments prepared for both Emma and me, totaling enough to buy 2 luxury cars. I hesitated a little, wondering if it was really okay to accept such a large amount of alimony. But thinking back to everything Richard had put me through, it felt more than fair. Then, I'll accept it as a token of your apology. I decided to accept it. When a few of my colleagues at work asked why I had separated from Richard, I told them the truth. Not only did Richard call me an old hag and mock me as slow, but he also became infatuated with Emma, a female doctor, stalked her obsessively, and even made outrageous claims like, "I'm Emma's partner, and Emma and I are having a child." And then he proposed to Emma in front of our families and relatives, saying he wanted to divorce me and marry her, only to be spectacularly rejected. After I honestly told my colleagues everything, the rumors spread throughout the office, and Richard, having lost his place at work, was forced to resign voluntarily. I later heard through relatives that Peter had told Richard to go train at a church run by someone he knew. Richard couldn't even manage his marriage because he was fixated on another woman. As a result, he became the target of severe criticism throughout the office and ended up having to resign. He's a pitiful man. Hoping that Richard would finally change his ways and become a decent person, Peter arranged for him to live at a church run by an acquaintance and undergo rigorous training. I wasn't told the details of the training at the church, but I've heard that Richard is so consumed by it that he doesn't have the time or energy for things like romance or marriage. I hope he doesn't leave the church until he's genuinely reformed. In fact, I wouldn't mind if he stayed there for the rest of his life. Meanwhile, after my divorce, I started receiving enthusiastic attention from a colleague who joined the company at the same time as me. According to my coworkers, I'm modest and humble, the kind of woman who attracts many men. Apparently, several of my male colleagues had secretly had feelings for me even before I got married. Among them, the one who especially had feelings for me was a colleague who joined the company at the same time as me. He started asking me out, seizing my divorce as an opportunity. I'm a bit tired from everything with my ex-husband. I'm not ready for another relationship right now. I just want to take a break.
I'm not asking you to start dating me right away. I'd just be happy if you join me for dinner after work.
He accepted my feelings with a gentle smile. For now, I'm enjoying meals and outings with him as a colleague. I'm in no rush to jump into another relationship, and I want to take my time to ensure that my next partner is truly a sincere person. After my divorce from Richard, I've taken a step forward, determined to enjoy new love and move on with my life. When I asked why he had created a family credit card without consulting me, Alan laughed and said,
"Come on, we're family. Of course, we should have a family card. What's your problem? Do you even remember who took in a loner like you? You shouldn't be complaining."
His condescending tone, which I'd never heard before, left me speechless. Is this really who Alan is?
If you're grateful, show it by taking care of my family more. Then maybe we'll recognize you as part of the family. Until then, think of it like a learner's permit.
A learner's permit for marriage. I've never heard of such a ridiculous idea. Seeing my silence, Alan pressed on with more intensity.
In other words, you're not an official family member yet. And if you don't like it, you can leave anytime. For now, our family is still just 5 people. We don't need a useless parasite hanging around.
I understand. I canceled every single credit card immediately and moved out. My name is Natalie Brown. I'm 27 years old. I'm a freelance illustrator. I used to work as a designer at a large advertising agency, but became independent 2 years ago after getting married. I now work from home. My parents passed away in an accident when I was a child. I was taken in by my maternal grandparents, but when I went to college, I moved back to my late parents' apartment near downtown Chicago and have lived there ever since. I met Alan at the Italian restaurant where he worked. The place had a cozy atmosphere, great food, and reasonable prices, so my coworkers and I became regulars. At one point, we started joking about the handsome waiter there. It was Alan. Alan was undeniably attractive. The manager even joked once that a good chunk of their regulars came just to see Alan, and I had to agree it. I won't deny that I was one of those admirers who thought he was incredibly charming. That's just how noticeable Alan was. But somehow we quickly grew close, and before I knew it, we were calling each other boyfriend and girlfriend. And to my surprise, we ended up getting married. I don't remember much from that time. It felt like one of those mornings when you wake up after a night out and suddenly realize there's someone next to you. But even so, I loved Alan and was happy back then. I left my design company when we got married and went independent. It was an amicable departure where I continued taking on freelance projects from the same company. Alan kept working at the Italian restaurant. His schedule varied depending on the day, with late nights being common. Since his work hours were irregular and it always wanted to be independent, I took the leap.
I think that's great, Natalie. You'll feel more relaxed and get to keep doing the work you love.
And so, our married life began. Neither of us was into flashy things, so we skipped a formal wedding and only made our marriage official. We just visited each other's families to say hello. Alan would go to work while I stayed home, balancing my job and housework. Even though our schedules didn't always align, we'd stay in touch and have dinner together when he got home. It was a fun and happy life. Marriage really felt wonderful. But about a year into our marriage, Alan suddenly said something that shook everything apart.
My family wants to visit soon. Is that okay?
Of course, I said yes. I had only spoken briefly with Alan's family during introductions, so I was looking forward to getting to know them better. Having lost my parents young, I'd always admired the idea of a big family. So, when his family of 4 showed up, I was left speechless.
Hey, where's my room?
Alan's sister, Harper, asked the moment she stepped inside. Harper was 32, 5 years older than both Alan and me. From what I'd heard, she worked as a cashier at a local grocery store. When we first met, she had been polite, but her tone now was startlingly rude. With Harper was her younger sister, Amanda, who was 18. Unlike Harper, Amanda stood silently and didn't say a word. I remembered how, even during our first meeting, Amanda had only introduced herself and stayed quiet. Feeling pressured by Harper, I led both sisters to the guest room and showed their parents to the spare bedroom. Once everyone had put away their things, Harper announced,
All right, since we're all living here now, you'd better start taking care of us.
I didn't understand what she meant. I glanced at Alan for help, but he smiled in a way I'd never seen before, a crooked and unsettling grin. It turned out that his family had sold their house and moved straight into my apartment without telling me.
Sorry about this. I guess their old house got hit with a sudden eviction, and they didn't have anywhere else to go.
If that was the case, why didn't he tell me sooner? I had assumed they were only staying for a day or two. This situation was really frustrating. I tried to explain my concerns as calmly as possible so as not to offend Alan. He lowered his head apologetically.
Please, just until they find a place to live.
If he said that much, I couldn't refuse it. I couldn't bring myself to kick out people who had nowhere to go, especially when they were the family of someone important to me, with no place to turn. I made them promise to find a place as soon as possible and reluctantly agreed to let them stay. but that decision would come back to haunt me. Alan's family showed no consideration whatsoever. All four of them, from the day they moved in, did absolutely nothing, leaving everything to me and speaking to me however they pleased. They didn't even pretend to be looking for a new place or a job. Out of curiosity, I asked what had happened to their jobs, and I was stunned by their response.
Oh, I quit that lame grocery store.
I had assumed Harper was a full-time employee since she had mentioned working there, but it turned out she was only a part-timer. I had assumed, because of her age, that she was working full-time, but after listening to her, I learned she had never held a stable job since graduating from high school. Her parents were also part-timers, and they too had quit their job before coming here. Of course, Amanda wasn't working. She had claimed to be a student preparing for college, but that was a lie.
There's no way we could commute to our old jobs from here. And besides, why would we need to work when we've joined a rich family?
A rich family? Who in the world were they referring to? Confused, I asked, and the answer shocked me.
They're talking about you. You got a huge payout from your parents' accident insurance, didn't you? And I heard this apartment doesn't even have a mortgage. You should be able to live the easy life.
Harper laughed as she said it. It was too much, so I confronted Alan when he came home, only for him to look more annoyed than I'd ever seen and raise his voice.
They had to leave their home suddenly. They must be exhausted. Can't you let them rest for a while? Or are you saying you'd throw my family out on the street?
I was frozen in shock, and then Alan's tone softened suddenly.
I'm sorry for shouting. I'm struggling too. And it's been a long day. I'm really tired. Can you please understand? Just hang in there a little longer.
Alan was skilled at handling women. Looking back now, I see that had always switched between being sweet and harsh to get his way. But at the time, I didn't realize it and reluctantly agreed to wait just a little longer. However, his family's behavior only got worse. When they were home, they treated me like a servant, ordering me around. When they went out, they demanded money.
How can we go job hunting with no money? I mean, we could try, but if we don't find work, we'll just stay here forever.
I had no choice but to give them some cash, only for them to return claiming they didn't find anything and spend all the money. I doubted they even went job hunting. But if I accused them of lying without proof, they would gang up on me and criticize me for hours. Telling Alan about it didn't help either.
They're frustrated because they can't find work. I'm sorry, just hold on a little longer. I'll talk to them.
And that was the end of the conversation every time. Eventually, I felt like speaking up was pointless. Alan must have said something to them at some point because their demands for cash became less frequent, but I never got any of the money back. That chaotic life continued for about 3 months until one day, I realized something alarming. Why is the credit card bill so high? Could this be unauthorized use? I hurriedly checked the statement, and every charge came from the family cards. The purchases ranged from food and drinks to books, games, expensive designer handbags, and clothes. There were 5 different card numbers listed. In other words, 5 family cards had been issued. Our credit card account was under my name, and Alan was supposed to be the only one using the family cards.
You're better at handling these things, and it's more convenient to manage payments this way, right? Can I leave it to you?
That's what Alan had said when I first took over managing the account, but it seemed he had secretly ordered additional family cards. The reason his family had stopped asking me for money was that they had started using the cards. When I found out, I was furious. When I asked Alan why he had created family cards for his parents and sisters without telling me, he laughed.
If I told you we didn't have any money, you'd just complain, right? Besides, do you remember who took you in when you were all alone? You should be grateful to your Savior's family.
His arrogant tone, unlike anything I had heard before, left me speechless. Is this really who Alan is?
If you're grateful, show it by taking better care of my family. Then we'll recognize you as part of the family. Until then, think of yourself as having a learner's permit.
A learner's permit for marriage? I had never heard of such nonsense. Alan, seemingly unimpressed by my silence, doubled down.
In other words, you're not officially part of the family yet. And if you don't like it, you're free to leave anytime. For now, our family has 5 members, and we don't need any useless freeloaders.
That's when I finally saw Alan's true nature. It felt as if all the blood had drained from my body. I began thinking seriously about divorce. Come to think of it, how did I even end up marrying Alan in the first place? I decided to start by recalling that. When I think about it, in the beginning, I just thought Alan was a good-looking guy. I was just one of the girls who admired him and got excited over how handsome he was. I didn't have any plans beyond that. But one day, while I was away from the table heading to the restroom, Alan spoke to me.
Natalie, you seem different from the others.
What?
I don't know. Attractive. Sorry, I shouldn't say that to a customer.
My heart skipped a beat. That kind of exchange kept happening, and I started becoming more aware of Alan. Looking back, I wonder if all of that was part of his plan to make me fall for him. The more I thought about it, the more it seemed likely. Come to think of it, one of my coworkers once joked about me in front of Alan, saying I was from a wealthy family and lived alone in a large apartment near downtown Chicago. Shortly after that, Alan started approaching me more frequently. He was probably interested in my assets and this apartment from the beginning. Alan wasn't even my type. He was a modern man in a good way, but in a bad way, he was somewhat of a playboy. I preferred calm, mature men I could have meaningful conversations with. Yet somehow, I fell for Alan. I've always wondered why. Alan was what you'd call a pretty boy. He was probably used to making women fall for him. It was second nature. Especially someone like me, who was inexperienced with men and had only just started her career. I bet he was confident he could easily make me obsessed with him. And I fell right into his trap and even ended up marrying him. The thought filled me with anger and humiliation, making me want to break everything in the house. But I wasn't foolish enough to actually do that. Instead, I resolved to get my revenge. To do that, I knew I had to endure this situation just a little longer. If Alan could manipulate me, then I would make his entire family dance in the palm of my hand. The apartment I live in was bought by my father with a loan shortly after I was born. Back then, real estate prices weren't as high, but after a large shopping mall was built nearby, the neighborhood flourished, and now it's considered a luxury apartment complex. My parents, who wanted a large family, bought a spacious unit so there would be enough room even if the family grew. That's why it's big enough for Alan's family to move in without feeling cramped. However, even with its size, it's still just an apartment. For someone like me who works from home, having Alan's entire family around was unbearable. But I endured it for the sake of my revenge. Just like Harper said, there's no mortgage on this place. When I was 3 years old, my parents both passed away. It was a car accident. They had attended my paternal grandfather's funeral, and on their way back, they were hit by a speeding car on the highway. I was supposed to go with them that day, but I had come down with a high fever from the flu that was going around at the time. So, my maternal grandparents came to stay at the apartment to take care of me. That's how I ended up being left alone. The loan was covered by the life insurance, so the insurance company paid it off. The only housing costs I pay are for maintenance fees and property taxes. When Alan saw how low those expenses were, he said he would contribute just a bit more than that amount to our household budget.
There's no mortgage. If I'm pitching in that much, your income should be enough to cover the rest. We'll each pay for our own personal expenses. Does that work for you?
When Alan said that, I naively agreed, thinking it made sense. Until then, I had covered all the expenses by myself, so I thought his contribution would at least ease the burden a little. Looking back, I realize how foolish that was. But at the time, I was blinded by my love for Alan and just went along with everything he said. Alan probably believed he was the head of the household, the breadwinner, and that he was providing for me. That's why he felt justified in calling me a parasite. But the truth was entirely different. I was the one paying for utilities, groceries, outings, and entertainment. And now, 5 more freeloaders had been added to that list. There was no way I could manage it on such a small budget. I wanted to get rid of the freeloaders as soon as possible, but I deliberately turned a blind eye for now. Alan's family spent money on whatever they pleased, while I endured it all, gritting my teeth. I am the one who laughs last. I told myself so over and over to get through this tough time. Finally, the day came for me to act. It was 3 months after I decided to get a divorce. I'm done. I'm exhausted. Choose me or your family. That day, I gave Alan an ultimatum. He was shocked, but I continued without hesitation. Not a single one of your family members lifts a finger to help. They dump all the chores on me. As you know, I work from home. It's not like I'm lounging around all day. And yet you treat me like a freeloader and tell me to know my place? I've had enough. Tears streamed down my face as I confronted him. Alan looked at me, flashed a sly smile, and said,
If that's how you feel, then you should leave. I've told you before. You're not a real member of the family yet. If you're already throwing in the towel, it just means you never earned your family license.
I looked at Alan, pretending to be shocked.
Why are you acting surprised? If you can't live with my family, then you have no choice but to leave. Oh, and by the way, since I'm not at fault here, he'll be keeping this apartment as compensation. And he'll take half of your savings too.
So that's what this was all about. That's why his whole family kept harassing me to make me leave. Even though I already knew, hearing him say it so bluntly still hurt. I had once loved this man enough to marry him after all. But his words solidified my resolve. Understood. I decided to divorce Alan. However, this apartment is mine, and I've done nothing wrong.
What did you say?
The reason for our divorce is that you moved your family in without consulting me and allowed them to mistreat me. I told Alan firmly. Alan looked utterly shocked, as though he never expected me to outright reject his demands. I suppose that made sense. I had always gone along with his every request since we got married. Remembering that made me even angrier with myself. I don't want to spend another second with any of you. I'll leave for now, but you need to start packing too.
You've got to be kidding. This is our home. We're not leaving. Do you even know about residency rights? You can't force people out of a home they're living in.
I listened to Alan's yelling as I walked out the door and headed to my grandparents' house. I explained everything and asked them to stay until things were settled. They were shocked, and when they learned what I had been through, they were furious. Tears welled up in their eyes as they scolded me for not coming to them sooner. Grandpa and Grandma, I'm sorry for worrying you, but I'll be okay now. You know me, I may look like a quiet person, but I'm not. I forced a smile as tears filled my eyes. The day after I left the apartment, Alan called me.
What the hell is this?
What are you talking about?
That's certified mail.
I was impressed by how efficient my lawyer was. I had informed them yesterday that I was leaving, and they had ensured the papers were delivered promptly today.
There's no way I'm paying any compensation, and I'm not leaving that apartment either.
But legally, you are required to pay, and you have no right to stay in that apartment.
What are you talking about? We're married, and the apartment mine too. If you insist, then buy me out for half its value.
What an absurd demand. This conversation isn't going anywhere. Please contact my lawyer from now on. With that, I hung up. I figured I'd call again the next day, but I wasn't in the mood to deal with him any further today. Sure enough, the next morning, my phone rang again.
What the hell is this?
The exact same line as yesterday. How unimaginative. What do you mean?
The credit card isn't working. What did you do?
What did I do? I canceled it. The card is mine, and you were just using a family card. Remember that? Yes, before I left, I switched all my automatic payments to a different card and canceled the family cards. Of course, when I canceled it, your family card became useless.
I was making payments too.
Oh, you mean the maintenance fees and property taxes? And only for the first 2 months. It wasn't much, but if you'd like, I can deduct that from your compensation. I spoke mockingly, and I could hear an incoherent scream from the other end of the call. Alan had only made payments for the first 2 months. After that, he made all sorts of excuses, claiming he needed time because of issues at work, and stopped paying altogether. If he had convinced himself that he had been contributing all along, his memory was truly pathetic. But I no longer cared. He was someone I was cutting ties with. Whatever his memory was like didn't matter to me anymore. That's how it is. And you'll need to pay your share of the household expenses I've been covering. I've kept detailed records, and I'll be submitting them as evidence.
Then I want half of the savings too. That's marital property.
Of course, we'll divide everything fairly. When I said that, he spat out a final, "Don't forget it," and hung up.
What the hell is this?
A few days later, he called again with the same opening line. He doesn't just have a bad memory, and he also has a terrible vocabulary. What do you mean?
The division of shared assets. Why is it 0? You've got loads of money from your parents, insurance payout and settlement, don't you?
Oh, so that's what he thought all along. I calmly explained that any savings I had before the marriage weren't considered shared assets, and that since there were no savings made after we got married, the division naturally resulted in 0.
Stop lying.
If you think I'm lying, why don't you consult someone about it? Either way, from now on, everything will go through my lawyer. We won't be speaking directly again. Goodbye. With that, I hung up and blocked Alan's number. 2 months after I left the apartment, Alan and his family finally moved out. Not because they had changed their ways or felt remorse. It was simply because they couldn't afford to live there anymore. Alan's income alone wasn't enough to support 5 people. His family had been living large using my credit cards. There was no way they could suddenly switch to a frugal lifestyle. I had let them spend freely for that very reason. I knew exactly how things would turn out. Alan's family began demanding shopping money from him. When he refused, they started stealing cash from his wallet. When Alan got angry, they all ganged up on him, saying it was his fault for kicking me out. On top of that, the electricity, gas, and water were all cut off. Of course, I had requested the utilities be shut off. I had notified the utility companies that I wouldn't be living there for a while. Alan tried calling to have them restored, but since the house was under my name, there was no way the service could be resumed at his request. Unable to bear the intense summer heat that carried into early fall, his family finally left the apartment. I had no idea where they went, and I didn't care to find out. Alan held out as long as he could, refusing to leave, but eventually gave up when he couldn't stand living in a place with no power or running water. After that, my divorce proceedings moved along faster than I expected. Not because Alan had reflected on his actions or agreed to my terms, but because he made yet another mistake. Before the divorce was even finalized, he had an affair. Actually, it seemed he had started seeing other women fairly early on, probably thinking that he had succeeded in getting rid of me. He bragged to young women that he owned a luxury apartment in a prime downtown location and brought them back to the place. It amazed me that he could do that with his entire family still living there. But apparently, they didn't mind since had been doing similar things even when he lived at his parents' house. Given his looks, I wouldn't say it was entirely unexpected. Knowing that, I had set up cameras in a few spots around the apartment before I left. All the evidence was recorded there. Maybe Alan thought I was too weak-willed to do something like that, but he had seriously underestimated me. I compiled everything, his mistreatment of me by moving his family in without my consent, creating family credit cards in secret and charging me for everything, kicking me out, and now the affair. With all that, I demanded a substantial amount of compensation. When Alan saw the amount, his face turned pale, and he desperately begged me to reconcile. Of course, I had no intention of taking him back. I knew he couldn't afford to pay the full amount, so I pushed for him to borrow as much as possible from his company. When I threatened to report the unauthorized family card creation as fraud, he grudgingly agreed to pay. I hope he works hard to pay off that debt. After the divorce was granted, I am still at my grandparents' house. I haven't decided what to do with the apartment yet. I might sell it. I had cherished it because my parents left it for me. But since they passed away when I was too young to form memories and because of everything that happened, I think they'd understand if I let it go. My freelance illustration work is gradually increasing. I might live alone again someday, but these days, it's easy to work efficiently even while staying at my grandparents' house. I'll lean on them a little longer and then start moving forward again. This time, I hope I'll find a partner who will walk through life with me, not someone who only looks good on the outside.
You're such a bad husband. Getting frisky on your wedding day?
Because this is the best way to calm my nerves.
The day of my wedding. When I peeked into the dressing room, Kevin and Sarah were tangled up, wearing absolutely nothing.
This is such a pain. Who cares about Anna's show-off wedding?
You're so mean. What kind of the groom says that?
I am not the star of today's wedding.
And let's be honest, Anna doesn't exactly look like a star either. No matter how fancy she gets, a plain girl is a plain girl. She's just a walking embarrassment.
I was the only one caught up in the excitement of this wedding. My heart, which had been racing just moments ago, suddenly fell silent. Sarah looks way more fitting in this scandalous state than in her white dress. Fine. Let's make them today's real stars. I'm Anna Miller, 32 years old. After dating Kevin for a year after meeting him at a party, he finally proposed to me. Not in some dreamy scenario with a diamond engagement ring at a fancy restaurant. Just our usual diner. His name is Kevin. We've always had an easygoing relationship. We toasted with our beers as he said, "Here's to our future." Though he proposed, we didn't rush into marriage. He respected my wish for a simple, small wedding, and we scheduled it for a year later. Going to different bridal fairs at venues became fresh and exciting dates. Every time someone called us, the bride and groom, it felt ticklish, and we'd exchange little smiles. I'd heard this before, but weddings really don't just happen overnight.
Yeah, I thought a year away sounded like forever, but it actually makes sense.
Right. And can you believe those price tags are actually real? There was a reason the wedding was set a year out. Okay, here's this month's payment. Thanks.
Got it. All set.
I handed $800 to Kevin. Kevin quickly counted the bills and tucked the money into his pocket. This was part of the wedding fund for a year later. We each put in $800 per month, planning to save about $20,000 over a year. I left the management to Kevin. Although $800 a month was a significant amount, we could do it since we both lived with our parents. So, by the way, which venue do you think looks good?
Isn't your mom's place the best option?
Actually, my mom works at a wedding venue. I was worried Kevin might feel uncomfortable with it being her workplace, but he was the one who insisted.
The venue's fantastic, and honestly, getting some perks because it's family is a huge help.
That was very like Kevin, practical and level-headed. Our wedding preparations were progressing smoothly. We had already introduced our parents to each other. Before meeting with the venue staff, we'd started visiting each other's homes more often to discuss details. Sure, we could have met at a cafe, but Kevin's mom, Betty, had welcomed me warmly and treated me like family. She always said, "Feel free to come by anytime," so I often visited his parents' house.
Wow, they have dessert buffets these days. Oh no, I can't eat much in this formal dress.
Mom, come on, it's a wedding. You can't be the groom's mom stuffing herself at the buffet.
You're right, too bad.
We always had fun conversations like this. However, the atmosphere changed drastically when someone unexpected showed up.
No way. Kevin's really getting married. That's hilarious.
While I was visiting as usual, she suddenly showed up. Without introducing herself, she pointed at me and laughed. Wait, this is his fiancée?
Well, I guess someone like her is about what Kevin could realistically get.
She was a young woman with soft, bouncy curls and glossy lips, a cute and bubbly type. Meanwhile, I was just wearing a hoodie with barely any makeup, as I wasn't planning to go anywhere special. I felt a wave of anger at her words, but I wasn't dressed confidently enough to talk back. Frustrated, I bit my lip and looked at Kevin for help. Kevin awkwardly scratched his head.
Hey, Sarah, that's rude, you know.
Then Kevin introduced her. She was his cousin Sarah. Despite being 5 years younger than Kevin, Sarah acted like she was above him.
Well, Kevin, you're over 30, and you can't afford to be picky anymore. I guess someone like this is realistic.
Kevin just chuckled sheepishly. Kevin's parents scolded Sarah for her rude remarks. In my heart, I was already dreading having this unpleasant person at the wedding. I forced a polite smile. Though Sarah hadn't stayed long, Betty gently urged him to walk her back home. Sarah left the house, looking dissatisfied. After Kevin and Sarah were gone, his parents apologized to me.
We're so sorry, Anna. Sarah speaks without thinking. Kevin has always been like her little sidekick since they were kids, so maybe she feels bitter about losing him to you.
A sidekick to a girl 5 years younger and undeniably cute? Is the reason Kevin didn't stand up for me because he can't defy his leader? How ridiculous for a grown man. Don't worry about it at all, I replied cheerfully, making sure my in-laws couldn't sense the dark thoughts swirling inside me. The following weekend, on the day of our wedding venue meeting, a big issue arose.
Sorry to keep you waiting. What's your name again? Oh, right, Anna. You're so plain I couldn't spot you.
Sarah showed up at the spot where I was supposed to meet Kevin.
I mean, come on. I've got way better taste than Anna. A wedding should be flashy, you know?
Leaving me bewildered and standing there awkwardly, Sarah and Kevin leaned in close like a cozy couple. As if it were the most natural thing, Sarah tagged along to the wedding planning meeting.
Hey, Kevin, don't you think these flowers look great?
Yeah, they do.
2 women sitting on either side of Kevin. One woman, full of opinions and excitement, wasn't even supposed to be there. And the real bride, me, sat there with a gloomy face. What kind of scene is this? The wedding planner gave Sarah vague smiles and nodded, trying to keep things pleasant. She turned to me with, "And as for you, the bride." But her voice was drowned out by Sarah's enthusiastic chatter. After a while, Sarah glanced between me and the planner and let out a chuckle.
Look, this isn't a funeral. Why is the vibe in this corner so depressing? If you're not feeling it, Anna, you might as well just go home.
I must have looked completely dumbfounded. My mouth hung open and I couldn't close it. Sarah's actions were so bizarre I started wondering if she was from another planet.
It was Anna who wanted the wedding in the first place. So why is she dumping all the details on Sarah? She probably just wanted to wear a dress and get all the attention.
Kevin was an alien too. How did this man, who until recently seemed like a normal person, suddenly become unrecognizable?
It's fine. I love planning events. I host barbecues and Christmas parties with my friends all the time. Leave the wedding planning to me.
You're the best, Sarah. I knew I could count on you.
Of course.
At this rate, my wedding was going to become Sarah's. No, this can't happen. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The more panicked I became, the tighter my throat felt. Kevin and Sarah burst into laughter together.
Kevin.
A voice came from behind us. Calm and deliberate, not loud, but it cut through the air clearly. Kevin and Sarah's laughter came to an abrupt stop. When I turned around, my mom was there.
Kevin, who is this young lady? She almost looks like the bride.
Kevin immediately pushed Sarah away. He dramatically wrapped his arm around mine and gave my mom a smile.
Excuse me, but you're disturbing the other couples here. Could you please keep it down a little more?
Oh, wow, sorry.
Thank you. Now your guest will be leaving, right?
What? Yeah.
My mom's smile was gentle, but her presence was incredibly authoritative. She firmly sent Sarah on her way. That night, my mom sighed in disbelief as she expressed her concern.
Kevin seemed like such a responsible guy. Why would he bring a woman who looks like a mistress to a wedding planning meeting?
Kevin's just her sidekick.
Her sidekick?
I explained that Sarah was his cousin and described their dynamic. My mom shrugged.
Seriously? What are they, elementary school kids?
Having worked in the wedding industry for years, my mom knew that even seemingly perfect weddings often had drama behind the scenes. Of course, the bride and groom are the main focus of the wedding, but sometimes family members try to take over and make it about themselves.
Whether she's a cousin or some kind of leader, this wedding belongs to you and Kevin.
Since that day, Sarah didn't show up again. Thanks to that, our planning sessions went smoothly, but Kevin looked bored. No matter what I asked, he only replied, "Sounds good." Eventually, even when choosing his tuxedo, he said, "Whatever you like, Anna." Not only during the meetings, but also in everyday life, Kevin's attitude toward me became distant. Maybe the reality of marriage was sinking in, making him feel anxious. Maybe we were both just experiencing pre-wedding jitters. My mom once told me, a lot of couples argue before the wedding. It's only natural because our lives were about to change drastically. We probably had to get over these little hills to truly become a married couple. After several arguments and reconciliations, a year flew by. Finally, our wedding day arrived.
Man, I'm nervous.
Kevin paced from one end of the bridal suite to the other. He'd practiced his groom's speech so many times that it was perfect. Even though I kept reassuring him, saying, "You've got this," he was still jittery. We both smiled wryly at each other. At that moment, the door swung open without a knock.
Hello. Where's the bride and groom?
My face froze instantly. It was Sarah.
Oh, there you are. You guys haven't done your makeup or changed yet. You're so plain, I almost didn't notice.
Sarah laughed as she spoke, wearing a pure white dress. Not just that, it was a mini dress that stopped above her knees, showing off her bare legs. If it were a little kid's outfit, it might have been cute, but for an adult, it was completely inappropriate. She said she arrived early to get her hair done at the venue. Even so, she was way too early. It made me suspicious. Did she come just to mess with us?
Hey, isn't my dress cute? I bet I look more like the bride than you.
I didn't want to let her ruin this special day. I forced a dry laugh and tried to brush it off. Soon, it was time for my hair and makeup. The staff gently asked Sarah to leave the room, and she did. I let out a relieved breath and sat down in front of the large mirror. But even as I got my makeup done, Kevin was nowhere to be seen. Since he'd been so nervous, I figured he was probably pacing around in the lobby. Once my hair and makeup were finished, I stepped out to look for him. It wasn't time for the guests to arrive yet, so only staff members were in the lobby. Maybe he's in the garden? The restroom? I thought as I walked down the hallway. When I reached the relatives' waiting room, I paused. The bride and groom's room was bright and entirely white. It was luxurious, with a bed and even a bathroom in the back. Kevin and I had joked before. When would we ever use this? We're not staying overnight. In contrast, the relatives' waiting room had a calm atmosphere, with brown tones throughout. Something about the relatives' room caught my attention, so I quietly opened the door. The first thing I noticed was the counter, where drinks for the guests would soon be placed. The room extended further, with a second section containing large, comfortable sofas. During our tour of the venue, Kevin had said,
"I like this room better than the bridal suite. These huge sofas are comfy enough to sleep on."
Just as I thought, I heard a noise coming from the back. But it was strange. A soft, high-pitched sound, almost like a kitten's meow, echoed through the room. Then, the sofa creaked unnaturally. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it would burst. Then I heard Sarah's voice through the thin wall.
"You're such a bad husband. Getting frisky on your wedding day."
I didn't need to see to know what kind of indecent thing she was doing. However, the man with her must be someone I didn't know. I silently begged that it was.
This is the best way to relax.
Then I heard a voice I couldn't mistake for anyone else's. It was Kevin's voice. My legs gave out and I crumpled to the floor. In a daze, I peeked into the next room. There was no mistake. Kevin and Sarah were tangled together, completely undressed. Kevin buried his face in Sarah's chest and murmured, one more time,
"Oh, is that really okay? Should the groom be doing this right now?"
My prep takes like 10 minutes. It's fine. I couldn't care less about Anna's braggy little wedding.
"You're so mean. What kind of the groom says that?"
I am not the star of today's wedding.
And let's be honest, Anna doesn't even look like one. No matter how much she dolls herself up, plain is plain. She's just a walking embarrassment.
Was I the only one caught up in the excitement of this wedding? The pounding of my heart suddenly quieted. As my mind cleared, I felt a wave of hatred toward the two of them, entwined without a care, still undressed. Sarah looked far more fitting in this scandalous state than in her white dress. Fine, if they want attention so badly, I'll make them today's stars. When I stepped out of the waiting room, my mom hurried toward me, her face pale. I will never forget them. When I said that firmly, my mom nodded resolutely. 20 minutes later,
What the?
Kevin was trying to force open the door to the relative's room. But there was no way it would open. I'd borrowed the key from my mom and locked them inside. I even added a support bar for good measure.
Hey, is anyone out there? The door won't open.
Kevin pounded on the door, calling for help. He had no clue what was happening outside. "What are you doing in there?" I called out to him.
Anna, the door won't open. Can you open it from the outside?
You want me to open it?
Oh yeah. Of course, hurry up.
He sounded irritated. I unlocked the door from the outside. The moment Kevin stepped out, he grabbed my shoulder.
Why didn't you open it sooner? Huh.
Kevin froze in place. Behind me stood all my relatives, his relatives, and even the wedding venue staff.
What's going on?
Sarah poked her head out, realizing the atmosphere had turned dire. She tried to play it off with a weak smile.
Hey, what's everyone doing here? So we were just looking around the venue, and someone accidentally locked the door on us. So weird, right?
She started offering excuses before anyone even asked. One of Kevin's relatives spoke up with a disgruntled tone.
The venue told us to rush over because something serious happened. And it turns out Kevin and Sarah were just locked in? What a stupid prank. We dropped everything to get here, and don't waste our time.
Other relatives chimed in.
Sarah, are you okay?
They even showed concern for her. Since I hadn't explained the full story to Kevin's relatives, it seemed like I was the one causing unnecessary drama. So, I decided to tell the truth. The truth is, Kevin and Sarah were having an affair in this room just a little while ago.
What?
Kevin, Sarah, and the relatives all stared wide-eyed. Kevin immediately reached out as if to grab me by the chest, but stopped midway, realizing everyone was watching. Instead, he awkwardly wrapped his arm around my shoulders and forced a grin.
What are you talking about? You're imagining things. Maybe you had a bad dream.
His mouth was smiling, but his eyes glared at me, screaming, "Keep your mouth shut." It felt like being stared down by a snake, but I kept my expression neutral and continued. It wasn't a misunderstanding. I saw it with my own eyes. That's why I locked them in.
Anna, come on. Don't lie like that.
Kevin's fake smile started to twitch. Seeing this, Sarah stepped in to smooth things over.
Anna, please stop. Look, everyone, Anna's always been super jealous. She's upset because Kevin and I get along well. Even though I was just helping with the wedding planning, she sent me away before. She's jealous of his cousin. That's so weird. She probably hates me because I'm cute. But to make up such a lie, that's just the worst.
Sarah's calm explanation made the relatives nod along. They began whispering while glancing at me. They were probably gossiping about how awful I was. Kevin's parents tried to calm things down, but no one was listening. No one would believe that a groom could be cheating at the wedding venue on the actual wedding day. To them, it was much more believable that the bride was making things up out of jealousy. Kevin's relatives looked at me with cold, piercing stares, like needles stabbing into my heart. Seeing this, Kevin became emboldened.
Come on, Anna. Apologize to everyone for lying and causing trouble.
At that moment, my mom stepped forward and apologized.
I apologize for calling everyone here earlier than expected.
I stood next to her, but I had no intention of giving the apology Kevin wanted. Everyone, thank you for coming to our wedding today. As a small token to make up for rushing you, we've prepared a special presentation. At my cue, the staff guided the relatives to the reception hall. Kevin and Sarah, looking confused, followed behind. Inside the hall, a giant screen had been lowered. Please enjoy the show. In the dim room, a loud, unmistakable moan echoed. At the same time, the giant screen lit up with a vivid video of Kevin and Sarah in their compromising state. Screams erupted from all around the room. Sarah stepped in front of the screen, yelling, "Stop it! Turn it off!" The scandalous scene only lasted a few seconds, but it had already become the highlight of the day. So, who's the liar here? I asked into the silent hall. Sarah, are you wearing that white dress because you think you're the bride? You said I didn't look like the main character, right? Well, if anyone looks like the star of the show, it's you. Look, everyone's eyes are on you. Today's main characters are you and Kevin. I clapped, but the entire room remained frozen in shock. Kevin's face turned bright red, and he grabbed me by the collar without hesitation.
You. How dare you?
The one who's being ridiculous is you, Kevin. My sharp tone made his grip loosen. He really was the loyal sidekick of a pretty girl. He couldn't stand up to anyone stronger. What an incredibly weak person he was. After taking a deep breath, I asked softly, "Let me ask you again. What were you and Sarah doing in the waiting room?" Kevin clenched his teeth.
This video, how, why?
There weren't any hidden cameras planted by the venue. The answer was simple. I recorded it on my phone.
What?
And I sent it to my mom. My mom waved her phone in the air. If I had confronted them alone, Sarah's manipulative charm might have made it easy for her to weasel out of it. So I secretly recorded them and immediately sent the video to my mom. My mom took swift action. Having worked at the venue for years, she had risen from planner to manager and had an exceptional ability to coordinate the staff. She quickly ordered them to lock Kevin inside, gather the relatives, and set up the video on the screen. Neither my mom nor I wanted to show the video publicly. It was our last resort. It was only to be used if Kevin and Sarah refused to confess.
You can't just record and humiliate us like this. You'll pay for this.
Kevin, with tears in his eyes, tried desperately to sound tough. Just then, Betty stepped forward and slapped him across the face.
Enough.
In fact, we had sent the video to his parents too. They never expected to see their son in such a disgraceful state on what was supposed to be his big day. I thought they might try to defend him. But instead, they said,
"Let's gather the relatives and confront them in front of everyone."
That's how my mom and I decided to act. Kevin and Sarah were family. Because of that, Kevin's parents made the painful decision not to sweep this under the rug.
My mom betrayed me?
Kevin staggered backward. He clutched his chest like he was about to start hyperventilating.
"You're the one who betrayed us, Kevin."
Betty shouted through tears. Kevin's sobs grew louder. Everyone frowned and looked down at him from a distance with contempt. Amid the chaos, the other main character was trying to quietly slip away from the crowd. But it was impossible for Sarah in her stark white dress to go unnoticed. She was immediately caught by a middle-aged relative nearby.
Let go of me. Don't touch me.
Sarah resisted, her head hanging low. The man holding her pleaded.
Tell me it's not true. You didn't cheat with Kevin, right? You love me, don't you?
Then another man, realizing the situation, shouted, So you were messing around with someone else too? Sarah kept her head down and didn't respond. It turned out Kevin wasn't her only affair partner. It was hard to believe she'd been involved with 3 of her own relatives. Kevin stopped crying and shouted at the men furiously.
I was special. I gave her $800 every month.
Sarah swayed on her feet before collapsing. It seemed Kevin had just said the one thing he should never have revealed. That confession opened the floodgates. The other 2 men admitted they'd also been giving Sarah money. In the end, Sarah's true goal was money. Kevin and the men, who moments ago were rivals for Sarah's affection, suddenly banded together.
You said I was the only one. You tricked me.
Sarah had become their common enemy. Surrounded by furious men closing in, Sarah's whole body trembled.
Help me.
To my surprise, Sarah's eyes locked with mine. Her relatives were all glaring at her with frightening expressions, so even her own parents didn't seem like an option for her to turn to. In this situation, she couldn't even meet their gaze. Attention seeker Sarah, everyone's watching you now. Aren't you happy? Sarah's face turned pale, her eyes rolled back, and she fainted. Kevin grabbed her limp arm and shouted,
Sarah, we're not done talking. You cheater.
I stepped forward and gently patted Kevin's shoulder. We're not done talking, cheater. Blaming his affair partner for cheating. It felt like some kind of comedy skit. Kevin really had no idea what kind of position he was in. The excitement drained from Kevin's face in an instant.
No, you've got it wrong. It wasn't an affair. I don't even like Sarah. I love you, Anna. It was more like visiting a professional. I was just paying Sarah.
I forced the biggest smile I could and nodded. Kevin's face relaxed slightly in relief. So, you paid Sarah, huh? With my money. Kevin kept smiling but tilted his head back and stared at the ceiling. The moment he admitted to giving Sarah $800 a month, I'd already figured it out. That amount was exactly what I'd been giving Kevin for our wedding savings. The money meant for our future together. The money to build our happiness had been used to satisfy his selfish desires.
Please forgive me.
Kevin looked up at me with teary eyes. I felt a sudden urge to stomp on his head but decided against it. I didn't want to dirty my shoe. The wedding was officially canceled. Since most of the guests were relatives, they were sent home after the incident. Of course, my engagement to Kevin was also over. Thankfully, we hadn't registered the marriage yet.
Well, here.
Even though I wanted nothing more to do with him, Kevin came to see me, holding something.
Even though the wedding was canceled, we still have to pay the fees. Isn't that a scam? Can't you get your mom to do something?
He handed me a bill for about $20,000. It was the full amount due since it was already the wedding day, completely expected. We can use our joint savings to cover it, I said gently on purpose.
Well, most of the guests were relatives, so we were expecting to make a profit from the wedding gifts. I didn't think we'd need to save money.
So you spend it all on Sarah. To Sarah, Kevin was someone she'd never considered dating under normal circumstances. But knowing he was about to marry someone else probably made her crave the attention. Kevin had eventually admitted that Sarah had been the one to seduce him.
Are you really going to marry someone that plain? Your life's going to be so boring. If you at least had money, you could have fun with cute girls like me.
Those words had prompted him to pull out the $800 he had in his pocket and hand it to her. After that, their relationship, both financial and physical, continued.
Anna, you're the one who ruined the wedding. You should pay for it.
Fury bubbled up inside me, and I opened my mouth to retort. But before I could say anything, Kevin disappeared from my line of sight. To my surprise, Kevin was blown away by his dad and fell to the ground. Kevin's parents had apparently followed him because they'd become suspicious of his secret outings.
It was Kevin who ruined everything.
Betty shouted, voicing exactly how I felt. Kevin's parents apologized to me profusely. Kevin was dragged away by his dad. Afterward, through a lawyer, I filed for compensation from both Kevin and Sarah. Apparently, Sarah had been the family's beloved darling. Her parents doted on her. Even after what she'd done, they might have been willing to cover her mess with money. But after the disgrace she brought on their family on the wedding day, even her parents seemed to give up on her. Kevin's parents later told me that neither of them had any savings, and they had to borrow money to pay me the settlement. They were also kicked out of their family homes. Kevin, who had never lived alone before, began to reek of neglect and spiraled into paranoia. A mutual friend told me he quit his job saying, "Everyone at work hates me." Meanwhile, Sarah was couch surfing at different friends' places but kept bad-mouthing me wherever she went, making people distance themselves from her. Soon, she would have nowhere left to go. Now that our engagement was broken off, Kevin and Sarah could date openly, but I heard they spent most of their time blaming each other. Kevin and Sarah's misery wasn't anyone else's fault. It was their own doing. Time passed after the chaos, and I was finally living in peace again. My life is over. I still felt sad sometimes when I thought about how my dream wedding had crumbled.
What are you talking about?
My mom smacked me on the back.
30's still young. Sure, if you just sit at home moping, your life will feel over. But if you step outside, you'll find new happiness everywhere.
Where is it, though?
Well, the top of Mount Whitney, or maybe the Sahara Desert.
That's way too far.
Really? Let's go together.
We both burst into laughter. My mom was right, and my happiness had to be out there somewhere. She suggested we go to a resort trip this weekend. Maybe she just wanted an excuse to travel with me.
No matter where you go or what mistakes you make, you'll always have a home to come back to.
My mom murmured this softly as she started packing for the trip. She was always strong and dependable. It hit me then. I was still being protected by my mom. I haven't given up on my dream of marriage. I'll build my happy family, and I'll become a mom as amazing as mine.
You don't seem surprised. Almost like you already knew Nancy was pregnant. Hey, Dad, you have an idea why, don't you?
When Steve heard Ryan's words, he let out a smug laugh, and without showing any guilt, continued talking.
The problem is, you started talking about leaving the house and not giving me any money, right? Nancy was kind to me. I think she liked me more than you, honestly.
Steve's nonchalant ramblings put Ryan on the edge of losing his temper.
So, when you're away on business trips, you leave Nancy lonely. Well, I had to step in and keep her company. The father of the child she's carrying is me. Sorry, but she came on to me first. Let's raise the kid together.
Steve's disgusting words made me feel like I was about to faint.
What? Are you kidding me?
Ryan said, and I stopped him from breaking his phone, as it looked like he was about to smash it. What followed was nothing short of chaos. How long do you plan to stay a child? You want a kid? Who's going to raise them? Stop wanting a child just to satisfy your desires. A child is a life, not your toy. I will protect my precious son, Ryan, and his wife, Nancy. Do you have anything to protect? Probably just your tiny, pathetic pride. If that's what you're protecting, why don't you hurry up and go to hell? I will never forgive you. My name is Olivia, and I'm a 43-year-old part-time homemaker. I have a son, Ryan, who I gave birth to when I was 20. I married my current husband, Steve, 6 years ago when Ryan was 17. Ryan's father was an older man I met while I was in college. He was incredibly intelligent and passionate about research. When we found out I was pregnant, we planned to get married once he graduated and started working. However, he tragically passed away in a fatal accident overseas during his research trip. I gave birth to Ryan on my own and managed to raise him with the support of my parents. It was during this time that I met Steve. Steve was a regular at the cafe where I worked, coming in almost every day. I still remember how childlike he seemed, always ordering ginger ale as soon as he sat down. Seeing him daily, I gradually became interested in him. Despite his sharp features, Steve was incredibly talkative and always cracked jokes that made me laugh whenever I came by his table. He usually came with his friends, but sometimes he'd wait outside for me to finish my shift.
Olivia, you must be tired. Want to grab dinner together?
When he asked me out, we went on several dates. Ryan, who was in high school by then, often stayed late at tutoring, giving me some time to enjoy myself. As we spent more time together, I started thinking about the possibility of marrying Steve. After losing Ryan's father while still unmarried, I thought I'd never be able to marry anyone. But then Steve appeared in my life like an oasis, at a time when I was desperately focused on raising Ryan. Steve treated me, an older woman, like a lady, and I started to imagine sharing my life with him. Most importantly, Ryan took to Steve very well. At the time, Steve was still in his 20s, so Ryan probably saw him more like an older brother. Even so, Steve often took Ryan out and doted on him. So, when Steve proposed, although I hesitated, I decided to marry him, wanting to give Ryan a father. Ryan, who was intelligent and well-behaved like his late father, quickly started calling Steve Dad instead of Steve after we got married. Steve didn't seem to mind at all. In fact, he looked quite pleased and fired up.
From now on, I'm going to work even harder to support our family.
6 years have passed since I married Steve. Ryan graduated from college and started his career. I also quit the cafe job I had at the time and started working full-time when Ryan entered college. This morning, I was rushing to get ready for work since I had a meeting early in the day. As I was sipping coffee in the kitchen as a quick breakfast, Steve came. "Good morning. Do you want something to eat?" I spoke to Steve, who was sitting on the couch, but he shook his head. It seemed he didn't have an appetite. He had probably been drinking late last night again and was likely hungover. After finishing my coffee, I grabbed my bag and was about to leave the house. Then he spoke to me in a sleepy voice.
"Oh, I'm going out this evening. Can you give me some money?"
I sighed. Here we go again. If I didn't give him the money, he'd come all the way to my office to ask for it. So reluctantly, I left some cash on the table.
"Thanks."
Steve took the money and headed back to his bedroom. I watched him leave before stepping out the front door. Steve had quit his job right when I secured a full-time position. With Ryan starting college, I thought we needed more money, so I got a full-time job. However, when Steve quit his job, it felt completely counterproductive. I tried encouraging him several times to find work again, but it never seemed to get through to him.
"Why should I work when you're also working, Olivia?"
It felt like the determination he'd shown when we got married had disappeared. Though I was exasperated, I had always planned to send Ryan to college, even if I were single, so I convinced myself it was just like having one more dependent to support and work tirelessly. Part of me also believed that Steve would eventually find a job. However, Steve, who had always lived a flashy lifestyle even before our marriage, continued to borrow money from me and spend his nights out on the town. I didn't want Ryan, who was diligently focused on his studies, to worry, so I kept Steve's unemployment a secret for a while. But Ryan, being sharp and perceptive, quickly figured it out. Part of me believed that Steve would eventually find a job. Even so, Ryan never blamed Steve. Instead, he secretly set aside part of his part-time job earnings to give Steve pocket money. This went on for several years. Steve showed no signs of starting work anytime soon and just kept asking me for money like he did this morning. He mentioned going out this evening, so he was probably planning to go drinking again. Steve, who had many friends, never turned down an invitation. He dressed in brand-name clothes and accessorized with expensive items. That never changed, whether it was before or after we got married. When I came home from work that day, Steve was unusually in the living room. He was sitting on the couch, drinking alone. "Hey, didn't you go out?"
The guy I was supposed to drink with said something came up. Apparently, his kid got sick. I could have invited someone else, but hearing about a kid kind of killed my vibe, so I decided not to go.
He said that and sulkily downed his glass of alcohol in one gulp. That's too bad. I wonder if the person he was supposed to meet was a woman since they mentioned a kid. With that thought lingering, I just said a few words and headed to the kitchen. Steve placed his glass down and let out a big sigh.
Guess it's no surprise. You can't really expect kids with a woman over 40.
I reacted to his words.
Guys around my age all have kids. Man, I'd love to try raising a child too. I really want a child of my own. Why can't we have kids?
Steve spoke as if talking to himself, but loud enough for me to hear.
Ryan used to be cute, but now he's 23. He got a job at some fancy company and acts all cocky. He's lost all his charm. Sometimes he even looks at me like I'm trash or something. Honestly, I can't stand him.
When we got married, Steve had wanted kids of his own, and I was determined to fulfill his wish. Since I was approaching 40 at the time, I started fertility treatments and paid close attention to my daily habits. But even after 6 years of our marriage, we hadn't been blessed with a child. Steve sometimes made remarks like this when he was drunk, blaming me in a way. He had no idea how much those words cast a shadow over my heart each time.
Mom, do you have a minute? Oh, where's Dad?
One day when Ryan came home from work, he called me into the living room. Still in his suit, he looked sharp with his glasses on. Looking at him like this, he reminded me so much of his late father. He's out drinking again. He should be back soon, though. It was already past 11 p.m. If Steve didn't come home by this time, he'd likely stay out until morning. Lately, Steve has been coming and going from home inconsistently. He still hasn't started working and seems to go out into the nightlife almost every night.
Mom, are you okay? No matter what happens, I'm always on your side.
Ryan smiled warmly as he spoke, just like he always had. He has always been a reassuring presence, someone who protects me. And I've made a firm decision to protect Ryan, no matter what happens. At that moment, I heard the front door open. From the hallway came the sound of unsteady footsteps, and then the living room door opened.
Oh, it's Ryan. Hey, don't just work all the time. Have a drink or something. You're so boring.
Steve seemed to be in a good mood today. Occasionally, when Steve ran into Ryan in the living room, it led to arguments. He would always accuse Ryan of looking down on him, projecting his insecurities. Even though he had quit his job himself, he seemed to feel inferior to Ryan, who had landed a successful career.
Hi, Dad. Can I talk to you for a moment?
Ryan said, seating Steve on the couch. I sat down beside him. Ryan, with a serious expression, sat on a stool across the table and looked at us.
Dad, Mom, I've decided to move out. I'm planning to get married.
Ryan's sudden announcement left me unable to hide my surprise. Of course, it was a happy kind of surprise. Steve seemed at a loss for words as well. Really? Congratulations. Are you planning a wedding? I eagerly asked Ryan.
Well, we're thinking of registering the marriage first and then having a ceremony once my work settles down.
Ryan answered, looking a bit embarrassed. I had met Ryan's girlfriend a few times before. She had a graceful presence and was a wonderful, independent young woman. As I felt my heart swell with joy, Steve's face grew more serious.
Are you really moving out? What about me? You're still going to give me money like before, right?
I was shocked by Steve's response. I couldn't believe he was only worried about himself at a time like this. And I had no idea Ryan had been giving Steve money.
Dad, when I get married, I'll be leaving this house. I'll have my own family, so I can't keep giving you money like I used to. If you need money, you should get a job. You're only 35, Dad. There are plenty of jobs out there.
Ryan said what I had always wanted to, but couldn't bring myself to say. I was sure he knew this would infuriate Steve, yet he still chose to speak up. As expected, Steve exploded in anger.
There you go again, looking down on me. I don't care about your marriage or whatever. You're not moving out, and you're going to keep giving me money like before.
Steve yelled and started throwing a tantrum. Since he had been drinking, he fell asleep soon after his outburst. Ryan carried Steve to the bedroom and then came back to the living room.
What a troublesome dad.
He said with a smile toward me. Ryan, congratulations on your engagement, I said to him once again. Despite Steve's strong opposition to Ryan's marriage, he seemed to have had a change of heart. Over the weekend, Ryan brought his partner, Nancy, to our house. I had met her a few times before, but she appeared even more mature and carried an even more graceful aura than before.
My name is Nancy. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Her manners were impeccable. Her makeup was modest, yet her skin was flawless, her hair shiny, and she was undeniably beautiful. Steve, who usually lounged around the house in sweats, darted to his room the moment he saw Nancy. He dressed to the nines, complete with a styled haircut, as if he were heading out for a night on the town. Though Nancy seemed quiet at first, she was full of conversation, and we never ran out of things to talk about. Steve was clearly very taken with her. Even after Nancy left, he asked Ryan to bring her over again soon. I was relieved to see that Ryan's marriage seemed to be progressing smoothly. After that, Ryan brought Nancy over a few more times. Each time, Steve was in high spirits, warmly welcoming her, and sometimes even suggesting she stay overnight. I kept a close watch on Steve. One time, I noticed him subtly touching Nancy when Ryan wasn't looking, taking advantage of his drunken state. While I understood he liked Nancy, such persistent physical contact with his son's partner was completely inappropriate. Nancy, while visibly uncomfortable, handled Steve skillfully. When I couldn't bear to watch any longer, I would step in and sit firmly between them.
Get out of here, old lady.
Each time, Steve would yell at me, but I didn't care about his outbursts as long as I was protecting Nancy, Ryan's important partner. Not long after, on Nancy's 23rd birthday, the two officially registered their marriage. Although they were now a married couple, Ryan's busy work schedule meant they hadn't found a new place to live yet. For the time being, they planned to live primarily at Nancy's apartment. While I felt a little sad about Ryan moving out, I wholeheartedly celebrated their new beginning.
I'll visit often. Oh, and I have a 2-week business trip coming up for training. During that time, Nancy will come by to pick up some of my stuff. Is that okay?
Nancy's apartment wasn't too far from ours, it seemed. I readily agreed to Ryan's request. However, I had a small concern, so I made a suggestion to Ryan. He readily agreed with a smile.
Thanks, Mom.
That simple expression of gratitude from Ryan warmed my heart. If anyone should be grateful, it's me, because I've made it my mission to protect Ryan and his wife, no matter what. 3 months had passed since Ryan and Nancy registered their marriage. At first, they frequently visited us, but lately, they hardly ever came by.
Hey, isn't Ryan or Nancy coming over? If Ryan's busy, just invite Nancy.
Steve said that and tried to get Nancy to come over to the house.
If she doesn't come, I'll go to their place myself.
Sometimes he even said that and tried to barge into Ryan and Nancy's home. I had to step in and stop him from doing so. Then Steve made a cryptic remark.
Well, I think Nancy will end up living here eventually.
Even so, when I told him it was inappropriate to meddle too much in a newlywed couple's life, even if it's his son, Steve reluctantly agreed. Knowing he couldn't see Nancy, Steve began going out to the nightlife even more frequently. He still wouldn't work, kept asking for money, and now seemed intent on disrupting Ryan's married life. I found myself wondering why I was even staying with Steve anymore. At first, I liked Steve for his sharp features, his smooth talking, and his kind demeanor. He got along well with Ryan and even said he would work hard for the family. But over time, he had quit his job, continued partying, and become completely unreliable. Even his ginger ale had been replaced by whiskey. The child Steve wanted was one I couldn't give him. Now that Ryan had become independent, I found myself wondering if there was any reason to stay with Steve. Sitting alone in the empty living room, I began to think about the future. Just then, our doorbell rang. It was almost midnight. Thinking Steve had come home, I unlocked the door without checking the monitor. Shortly after, the doorbell at the entrance rang. It was Ryan who had arrived.
Mom, I'm sorry for showing up so late. Is Dad home?
Ryan's face looked unusually tense, almost frightening. When I told him Steve wasn't home yet, Ryan frowned and clicked his tongue. It was the first time I'd seen him behave like this. Did something happen? I led Ryan into the living room and had him sit on the couch. He kept his head down, his face still stern. Sensing his intensity, I was at a loss for words, but Ryan, noticing the atmosphere, finally spoke up.
Mom, I know this might be hard to hear, but I need you to be prepared. Nancy is pregnant.
Even though he told me to prepare myself, I couldn't help but cry out in joy. Pregnant? Congratulations! That's wonderful! I had been nervous about what he might say, but the news of a pregnancy was a welcome surprise. Still, Ryan didn't relax his expression. What he said next would reveal something far more troubling. It was just the other day that they found out Nancy was pregnant. After she complained of feeling unwell, Ryan went with her to the hospital, where they received the news. Ryan was overjoyed and deeply moved when he heard. However, he noticed that Nancy's expression remained dark. Thinking it was due to her physical condition, he had her rest at home, but that night, something terrible happened. In the middle of the night, Ryan was startled awake by noises and loud voices. When he checked the house, he found Nancy in the kitchen, holding a knife and crying hysterically. Ryan hurriedly took the knife from her and calmed her down, guiding her gently to the couch. Nancy cried uncontrollably until past 3 a.m., before finally calming down. He let her sleep that night, and since the next day was a holiday, Ryan stayed by her side all day.
I knew there had to be a big reason behind Nancy's actions. I kept telling her over and over that no matter what she said, I'd be on her side. Eventually, she opened up to me.
And then, Ryan told me what she had shared with him. It was shocking. The horrifying details made my legs tremble, my jaw quiver, and left me utterly speechless. I could feel Ryan's boundless anger radiating from him. It wasn't sadness or frustration. It was a fierce, burning rage. Ryan clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white. In the heavy silence, my phone suddenly rang. It was Steve. When Ryan saw who it was, he pressed the answer button and switched to speaker.
Hey, Olivia. You're still up. I'm not coming home tonight. Oh, and I've got plans tomorrow too. So make sure to leave some cash before you head to work. Thanks.
Steve's drunken, cheerful voice came through the phone. Hearing Steve's voice seemed to drain the fury from Ryan's face, leaving behind a cold, emotionless expression.
Hey, Dad. Out drinking again tonight, right?
Ryan's usual gentle tone, strangely calm, felt terrifying.
Ryan? Oh, you're there. Is Nancy with you? If she's coming over, I should have stayed home.
Ryan furrowed his brow at Steve's words.
Dad, Nancy's at her parents' house right now. By the way, she's pregnant.
Ryan quietly dropped the news. I clasped my hands together in silent prayer and listened intently for what would come next.
Really? That's great news. So, she's pregnant. That's wonderful.
I could see Ryan's fists clenching tighter and tighter at Steve's response. Though silent, his fist trembled violently.
You don't seem surprised. Almost like you already knew Nancy was pregnant. Hey, Dad, you have an idea why, don't you?
I thought it would be too cruel to let Ryan say anything more, but I was already a mess, tears streaming down my face, unable to say a word to Steve. Hearing Ryan's words, Steve let out a smug chuckle and began speaking without a hint of remorse.
Well, it's your fault for talking about moving out and cutting me off financially. And seriously, landing someone as gorgeous as Nancy. How lucky can you get? You've always looked down on me, haven't you? But Nancy was kind to me. Honestly, I think she liked me more than she liked you. I don't know why, but married women seem to fall for me.
As Steve's nonsensical and smug words continued, Ryan's anger reached a boiling point.
That's why when you go on business trips and leave Nancy alone, she gets lonely, right? So, I ended up keeping her company. I'm the father of the child she's carrying. Sorry, she came on to me first. Let's raise the child together.
Steve's appalling statement nearly made me pass out.
Are you kidding me?
He looked ready to smash the phone in his hand, and I stopped him with all my strength. What followed was pure chaos. Ryan stood up and kicked the couch. The small items on the nearby shelf were scattered everywhere, and the coffee pot flew off somewhere. He ripped the curtains down, and the metal fittings of the rails scattered everywhere. The vase also tipped over, spilling flowers and water all around. Ryan's eyes were completely unfocused, as if he had lost himself, and there was no clarity in them. I wrapped Ryan's body with a blanket that was nearby. Then I hugged him tightly. Using the same soothing methods I would for a whimpering child, I tried to calm his heart. Eventually, Ryan stopped his rampage, collapsing to his knees and bursting into tears. Steve's call had already ended. Ryan and I cried together for a while. I didn't know how much time had passed. It felt like I had cried until there were no more tears left, using up all the moisture in my body. Ryan, with the same emotionless expression as before, was lost in thought. Then he looked at me and said,
Mom, should we send him straight to hell?
Ryan said this and suggested a terrifying plan for revenge. Of course, I would fully cooperate. I nodded without saying a word. Steve, wasting time every day, not working, but only asking for money. How fun is the nightlife? Does the alcohol you drink with money earned by others taste sweet? And does breaking apart the love that others have carefully nurtured for their own selfish desires feel good to you? You used to be someone too good for me, yes, back then. Thank you for being kind to young Ryan. I appreciate it, but it seems like Ryan has long since surpassed your mental maturity. How long do you intend to remain a child? You want kids. Who's going to raise them? Stop wanting children just for your own desires. Kids are lives, not toys. I will protect my precious son, Ryan, and his wife, Nancy. Do you have anything left to protect? Probably just your petty pride, right? If you're busy protecting that, could you just go to hell? I'll never forgive you. Ryan and I are now resolutely heading towards Steve. It's been a month since Steve made that horrific confession, and I haven't returned to our house. Right now, Ryan and I are staying in a hotel in the city. I just couldn't bring myself to face Steve. The thought of that man being my husband makes me sick. No, it's beyond that. I feel nothing but hatred towards Steve. Over the past month, Steve has called me multiple times, but the only thing he wants is money. He hasn't expressed any concern about me not coming home, nor has he apologized to Ryan. Instead, he constantly nags.
Hey, Olivia, enough is enough. I can't go drinking because you haven't given me any money.
It got so loud that, just once, I transferred Steve an amount of money that anyone leading a normal life would be perfectly fine with for about a month. But Steve spent it all in one night. I considered that my responsibility fulfilled and have since ignored any further calls from Steve. Steve is the kind of person who would barge into my workplace if it meant getting money. I couldn't allow him to cause trouble at work, so I explained the situation and resigned. We're living in a hotel now to avoid Steve from coming to our home. Nancy decided to take some time off and stay at her parents' place for a while. For the past month, Ryan and I have been fighting tirelessly to protect what's precious to us. We can't keep crying anymore. There are things we must do to move forward. With the information we've gathered over the past month, Ryan and I have come to face Steve. Today, I told Steve I was coming home, so he'll likely be quietly waiting at the house. He probably thinks he'll get money. As long as Steve can get money, he'll adjust to whatever the situation is. He's a true money-hungry person. I pressed the intercom. It's strange to press the intercom to my own house. But right now, I don't even want to think of this house where Steve lives as mine. I'm sure Ryan feels the same way. When we first got married, I was grateful that Steve accepted both Ryan and me. That's why, even when Steve quit his job and just played around, I thought I should give back the kindness he had shown by serving him. But 6 years have passed, and the grace period is over. And now, Steve has committed a grave mistake. We will never forgive him. I heard the sound of the door being unlocked, so Ryan and I entered the monster's lair. In the living room, Steve was sitting on the couch in his usual going out style.
I'm heading out, so make it quick if you want to talk. And hey, don't forget the money.
While putting a flashy watch on his left wrist, Steve said this with a tune humming under his breath. I could tell he was probably going on a date with a woman, but I felt no jealousy at all. Maybe I'm a strange wife for not feeling that. Ryan remained surprisingly calm when facing Steve, and I was relieved. Before we came here, I had checked Ryan to make sure he wasn't carrying anything dangerous. He told me I was being overly cautious, but the anger Ryan displayed back then was so intense it couldn't be described in words. I thought it was not impossible that Ryan might do something rash when meeting Steve today. Ryan spoke to Steve in a calm voice.
Dad, don't you have anything to say to me?
Steve thought for a moment before responding.
Oh, $1,500 a month will be fine. It's a little tight, but if I get that much pocket money, I can make do. Olivia will pay the rent, and Nancy will do the housework, right? I'll appoint you as my pocket money provider.
I was speechless, unable to close my mouth, as Steve said something I couldn't tell if he was serious or joking. Ryan glared at Steve with an icy expression.
I'm amazed. After what you did to Nancy, you don't even have a word of apology? Of course, even if you apologized, I wouldn't forgive you. But I wanted to see a little bit of sincerity from you.
Ryan said this in a quiet tone, and Steve reacted as if it was nothing.
Why should I apologize? It was your fault for being away on business trips, wasn't it? Nancy came to pick up your stuff, and she complained to me. She said you were boring because you were always working. And she was lonely because you were away on a 2-week business trip. I've told you before, Nancy came on to me first. I just kept her company because she was lonely. If you're angry, you should yell at lazy Nancy instead of me.
As Steve sprayed a strong, suffocating fragrance on his body, he said this. At Steve's words, Ryan stood up. I hurriedly made him sit back down on the couch and tried to calm him down. Ryan, having calmed down a bit, said to Steve,
Don't insult Nancy. She's completely innocent. I know you tricked her and took advantage of her.
Ryan glared at Steve. Steve, with a calm expression, responded,
Tricked her. That sounds bad. If you're going that far, show me the proof. But you don't have any, right?
Steve showed a smug expression. He probably had some kind of confidence in this. In fact, the security camera at the entrance of the room had its power disconnected, and all the footage during the time Ryan was away had been wiped clean. This meant there was no record of Nancy or Steve coming and going. The same was true at the building's management office, where the security camera had also been turned off. The building manager said there might have been a temporary power outage, but it was odd for the security camera alone to be without power for such a long time. We were certain this was a deliberate act by Steve. So foolish, such a naive way of thinking. It would be troublesome if Steve felt victorious just from shutting off the security cameras.
If you're going to say that, I'll show you the proof you want.
Ryan stared directly at Steve's face and launched an app on his smartphone. It was an app for playing audio recordings. This app allowed audio recorded on devices like voice recorders to be transferred to and used on the phone. Ryan, with determination, pressed play. The audio started with a conversation between Nancy and Steve when Nancy came to pick up her things from Steve's house. At that point, the recording ended with Steve saying, "See you," and it was clear Nancy had left the house. But the real issue came afterward. There was the sound of a door slamming shut. It was likely when Nancy returned home. Immediately after that, another loud slam was heard. From Nancy's scream, it was apparent someone had opened the door.
What's wrong? How did you find this place? Did you follow me?
Nancy's frightened voice could be heard.
Don't make it sound like I was following you. I came because I forgot to tell you something. Did you know? Ryan actually has a huge debt. I've been covering it for him, but he hasn't paid me back at all. Can't you talk to him and do something about it?
At Steve's words, I couldn't help but glance at Ryan's face. Ryan shook his head, looking dismayed.
Debt? I don't know anything about that.
Nancy's voice trembled. Steve twisted his face as he listened to the recording.
I really need to get that money back soon. If Ryan can't pay it back with money, I'll need you to help me out.
Ryan stopped the playback at that point. I also checked, but after that, the audio was unbearable to listen to. It was Steve threatening Nancy to pay him back, and if she couldn't, he was coercing her to pay with her body. Of course, the fact that Ryan had any debt was a complete lie. This was a baseless lie from Steve.
I gave Nancy a voice recorder because I was worried something might happen while I was on my business trip. I told her to start recording as soon as she woke up and keep it in her pocket. It was the right call. Sure enough, you did something horrible to Nancy.
This was something I had advised Ryan about before. I had shared my concerns with Ryan about Steve's behavior toward Nancy. As a precaution, Ryan must have had Nancy carry the voice recorder.
That's not enough proof. You know you can even manipulate the audio now, right? You can easily fake that kind of sound. Without video, it's useless as evidence.
Steve was clearly shaken, but he still had enough energy to argue. Ryan sighed and continued.
Sorry, but there is video. While I was on my business trip, Nancy sent me daily video messages. They were pretty long, so I recorded them on my computer. She was working on her computer before she went to pick up her things that day. Then, you barged into Nancy's house. Guess what? It was all clearly recorded. The computer's built-in camera captured everything that happened in the room.
As Ryan said this, tears started flowing from his eyes. It must have been difficult for Ryan to review such painful footage of Nancy. But despite this, Ryan fought to protect Nancy and prove her innocence.
This is no joke. What the hell? Delete that video and audio right now. What are you trying to do? Blackmail me? What's your goal here? It's your fault you're not giving us any money. What's the problem? It's a good thing. A new family member is coming. Shouldn't you be happy about that?
Steve's selfish words made Ryan slam his fist onto the table.
Blackmail? You're the one who tricked and blackmailed Nancy. You took advantage of her while I wasn't around, and that's nothing but cowardly and despicable. It's the lowest, most horrible act possible.
Ryan's intense anger was enough to make even Steve flinch.
I'm suing you for damages.
Steve reacted strongly to that.
What are you talking about? There's no way I can pay you damages.
Steve countered with a half smile. At this point, his defiance no longer stirred any emotions in me. I had passed the point of anger. Ryan remained calm and spoke to Steve.
If you can't pay, then you should go to jail.
Steve's actions were nothing less than a great crime. Neither Ryan nor I had any intention of forgiving him. Whether it's damages or prison, I just want him to suffer.
You're planning to send your father to jail? Even though we're not blood related, I'm your mother's husband, you know? If you do something so unfilial, Olivia will be heartbroken. Are you really okay with that?
Steve now using the word father was completely frustrating. I decided to deliver the reality to Steve on Ryan's behalf. Steve, thanks for your concern. You're no longer Ryan's father, so don't worry. I'll be divorcing you, but I know you won't agree easily, so let's talk through a lawyer. Oh, and by the way, I'll be demanding damages from you, so look forward to it. Steve seemed like he wanted to say something, but he just opened and closed his mouth, unable to speak. You've been involved with so many women, haven't you? I had it checked out. If you want proof, just ask. I've got plenty of photos from the scenes. Some of them were even married women. Looks like you weren't lying when you said you're popular with married women. I'm sure the husbands of those women will also be suing you for damages. Good luck with that. I felt a deep pain in my heart thinking that if I had divorced Steve sooner, Nancy and Ryan wouldn't have been hurt. That's why I'm making sure to bring justice to Steve here. The lawsuit with Steve will no doubt bring me some hardship as well. But it's also a reminder to myself, so I'm ready to face it.
By the way, this is a side note. Nancy's family is from a pretty traditional background, you know. They've been guarding that land for generations. Nancy's father was the 8th generation gentleman. He's planning to come and greet you because of this matter.
At Ryan's words, Steve's face turned pale. It's likely that they're involved in some sort of organized crime. I'm looking forward to the visit.
Are you really going to abandon me, Olivia? If Nancy has a child, it's my child, you know? Why don't we just stay together and raise the baby? Since you couldn't have one, let's raise Nancy's child together, okay?
Steve's words were as selfish as ever. He had no idea how selfish his words were. I had planned to keep the truth from him as a final act of mercy, but Ryan and I felt Steve should know the truth. Ryan, after exchanging a glance with me, nodded and spoke to Steve in a calm voice.
Sorry, but the child in Nancy's womb is not yours. It's mine. We had the weeks checked and calculated at the hospital. And considering everything, it's my child.
Ryan's quiet yet powerful words left Steve unable to respond. I added my own comment. I didn't tell you before, but remember when we did fertility treatments together? You probably had a lot of tests, and the cause of the infertility was actually your male infertility. You had no viable cells. That's the truth. Steve's face filled with the greatest despair I'd seen all day. He had no money, he was losing his family, and now he was on the verge of losing his dignity as a man. The tiny pride Steve had protected was blown away in an instant. Tears started to fall from Steve's eyes as he crumpled to his knees. I felt no sympathy. I don't know what will happen to Steve from now on, but since we are no longer married, it's none of my concern. It's the consequences of his own actions. He should have stuck with his ginger ale and not bothered with alcohol. Now I'm living near Ryan and Nancy's new place. I don't go in and out frequently, as that would be inappropriate, but I enter and leave as needed. My main role is to help Nancy, who is pregnant, but she has been actively engaging in housework and exercise without being lazy, even during her pregnancy. There are times when her health isn't great, so I step in to prepare meals or clean when needed. My relationship with Nancy is good, and we've become close enough that Ryan gets a little jealous sometimes.
Not sure where he got it from, but Dad's alimony payment came through all at once.
After Nancy fell asleep, Ryan told me in the living room. He had probably gone to his own family to beg for the money. It turns out Steve was raised like a spoiled child in a strict household. He'd been kicked out of his family home for a while due to his reckless behavior. Ryan and I would have preferred he face the full consequences of his actions, but Nancy refused.
He should suffer in the outside world.
It was a resolute opinion, fitting for the daughter of the 8th generation. Being exposed to public scrutiny and living with the feeling of shame is a form of punishment in itself. Making his own money, paying back what he owes, and atoning for his sins.
He has nothing left to escape.
When Nancy said this with such calm grace, it surprised both Ryan and me. Ryan is doing well at work, and we're both eagerly awaiting the birth of their child. Ryan buys baby clothes and toys every day, and Nancy has been complaining that the house is getting cramped. I finalized my divorce with Steve through mediation. I'm planning to visit Ryan's father's grave this weekend to report everything. On a beautiful sunny day, Nancy gave birth in the warm sunlight. The healthy baby girl they had was starting to resemble Ryan in some way. I've gained something else I want to protect. The tiny hand of the baby grasped my finger tightly.